Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, so good afternoon and welcome back to the afternoon session of the public hearing and public meeting of September 13th, 2022. We will resume this afternoon with public hearing item number 2, which is an application for 65 Spring Street, and we will continue the agenda in the order it is as it is shown as on our website. And I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And as noted, we will start with public hearing item number 2, LPC 23-10180, application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 496, lot 35. 65 Spring Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. This is an altered Italianate style store and tenement building designed by William E. Waring and built in 1878, and the application is to replace storefront infill.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Marie Garino, preservation staff. The item before you is for 65 Spring Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. The building is located on the north side of the street between Crosby and Lafayette Streets. And the application is to replace storefront infill and to relocate these historic cast iron columns. So here are the 1940s tax photos. You can get a bit of an idea of what the historic storefront looked like here with the projecting storefronts and cornice. And these are the existing condition photographs. The historic columns are all intact and located in their historic location, but the infill is modern. Here's our existing floor plan. So you can see there's 2 small storefronts flanking the central residential entrance. And here is the proposed plan. So you can see those 2 columns have been moved outwards to create one large storefront with an entrance at the east side of the building here, and the residential entrance being moved to the west. And then so here's the assumed historic condition, the existing condition, and the proposed. So you can see in the proposed, these middle columns are shifting outward to create one large storefront window. This will be the retail entrance over here on the right and the residential entrance on the left. And the residential entrance will feature frosted glazing at the door and the side light, and an existing plaque will be relocated over the side light. And this plaque is commemorating a previous tenant. And the proposal also includes a new metal cornice with details that recall the historic cornice. Again, we have our existing and proposed drawings. And here's an enlarged floor plan of the existing condition. One thing to note here is that at all of the entrances, you have to step up. Part of the proposal is to lower the front of the floor slab here to have at-grade entrances. And then we just have some existing and proposed street view renderings. And the applicant, Robert Bianco, is here to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Great, thank you, Marie. Okay, Robert, would you like to add anything at this point?
Yeah, I'll just go quickly through some of the precedents and historic context. Thank you, Marie. Robert Bianco, PKSB Architects. This slide is showing documentation of 2 other buildings by this same architect. These are nearly identical buildings, mixed-use tenement buildings, and we have some pretty good photographic documentation of the storefront cornice, which we used as a reference for our proposed details in the new cornice. Next slide. We also looked at some precedent for relocation of historic cast iron elements in the Soho area, the first being at 155 Mercer Street. This was originally built as a firehouse, and the 2 center cast iron columns seen in the center photo at the top were relocated in around the 1950s to accommodate newer, more modern firefighting vehicles. Next slide. And a more recent modification that was reviewed by the commission and approved under a C of A application was at the Puck building just outside the Soho district, where cast iron piers seen on the the bottom left-hand side were removed and replaced by other cast iron elements from other portions of the building to accommodate new retail use at the ground floor. Next slide. And then in terms of this building typology, the specific mixed-use tenement typology, this is an inventory of other buildings in Soho and Soho Extension where a tenement building had a single storefront with a main building entrance off to the side. So while the historic condition at 65 Spring Street is different, that there could have been a configuration that was similar to what we're proposing and would have been historically accurate and historically appropriate. Next slide. And I'll just quickly go through the details. I think Marie gave a good overview of the design. This is a proposed existing section through the eastern bay, and proposed to the right, we're recessing the retail entry door, proposing a new projecting storefront cornice. Our cornice is a bit simplified, but inspired by the historic cornice, and it complies with all building code and zoning regulations for projections beyond the property line. Next slide. And then an existing and proposed section through the center of the building where the current main entrance exists. We would be replacing that with a large display window sitting on an 18-inch high bulkhead. Next slide. And then a similar section at the residential entry door. Next slide. Just enlarged details at the two entrance doors. All materials proposed are painted aluminum. As Marie stated, the door and side light at the residential entrance will be frosted just for additional privacy, and the plaque commemorating the artist who lived in the building will be located at the center of the side light. Next slide. And the proposed cornice details, again, simplified from what was there historically, but respecting the historic details for the brackets and the overall profile. And we are proposing signage at the flat center portion of the fascia directly above the storefront display window. And recessed LED lighting that would be indirect lighting for the signage. Next slide. Proposed plan details and bulkhead detail, again, all painted aluminum materials. Next slide. And a bracket sign which would comply with all landmarks rules located directly above the retail entrance. And I think we'll end on another image. Next slide, sorry. Proposed rendered view in the context of the block. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, we don't see any questions. Oh, yes, here we go. Vice Chair Bland, please go ahead.
There, unmute myself. On the cross section through the display window, I thought I saw that the new window was not all the way behind the new relocated cast iron columns. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, and that's something we discussed with the staff late on Friday, and we did discuss with ownership. But I think we were proposing pushing that out just because the original configuration of the storefronts featured recessed doors and projecting display windows. But we did discuss the design option of pushing it fully behind the column.
Yeah, particularly in the display window, it seems like you could do that. And as a recompense for moving them from their historic location, maybe that's something that's worthwhile thinking about. Anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And as always, we will start with anyone who signed up in advance and get to everyone else. And I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do have a number of speakers signed up today. Our first speaker will be Councilmember Christopher Marte. And Councilmember, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Connor in lieu of the council member. Yeah, let me know if you need to reorder or not.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Connor Allerton. I'm presenting testimony on behalf of council member Christopher Marte, representing Council District 1, where this application lies. Thank you, Chair Carroll and commissioners, for allowing me to testify today. I urge you to reject this application as it's presented, as I did in June, on June 14th, when this application was last heard. Not only has the applicant failed to adequately communicate with Manhattan Community Board 2, but the application presents serious accessibility concerns for residents living above the commercial floor, as well as alterations to the building that would significantly degrade the historic character of the building and block. Community Board 2 residents of 65 Spring Street and community members have all raised issues with this application concerning both the livability and the historic integrity of the alterations in question. The reconfiguration of egress, residential floor area, and rear yard of the building presented before you would undermine the safety and habitability of the building, especially for its older residents. Such exterior and interior alterations, in order to expand commercial profitability, would further divest from the historic character of the building and does not follow the values and guidelines of development in historic districts such as this one. For these reasons, I urge the commission to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Valerie De La Rosa, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Carroll and commissioners. My name is Valerie De La Rosa, and I am here today representing Manhattan Community Board 2 and our recommendation of denial of the application before you for the tenement building at 65 Spring Street in Soho. I believe you have a copy of the resolution. Thank you for allowing CB2 to present today. CB2 also heard a similar application for this building in November 2017 and unanimously recommended denial at that time. The current application is to significantly modify the original storefront facade, including cutting and moving the original and intact fluted and paneled cast iron columns to create a new single large generic and undivided commercial unit over 2 historic commercial units with a new entrance on the east side. After cutting and relocating the 2 historic cast iron columns to the side, both the centered tenement entrance and central staircase will be moved to the west side of the building. This results in direct endangerment to and potential displacement of the existing historic rent-regulated units because of the apartment reconfiguration, which would move the staircase away from the middle of the building where it currently allows for 2 apartments per floor. The historic designation report explicitly states that while there have been some changes, this apartment house, which remains in residential use on the upper floors, is evocative of the transitional period of the Soho area when both loft buildings and multiple dwellings were being constructed in the area. The key historic residential and commercial features of 65 Spring include current cast iron column locations, central tenant entrance, existing central staircase, and symmetrical commercial units should remain unchanged. CB2 recommends denial because the proposed design represents only the applicant's commercial interest in operation of this building over and against the historic preservation of the facade. 2, the proposed design significantly alters the contributing benefits of this contextual historic tenement building and improperly modifies it to mimic commercial loft buildings. 3, by taking away key historic features such as the central entrance and staircase, which allows for 2 apartments per floor, Key to the contributing tenement building, the changes would allow for permanent displacement of rent-regulated tenants in the building through non-historic reconfiguration by moving the staircase to allow for larger combined units when these units should instead be protected. The core of this application is embodied in the removal of fully intact, fluted and paneled cast iron columns by cutting and moving the original fabric to non-historic locations and erasing the key contributing transitional components of this building as a tenement building in Soho, as noted in the designation report. CB2 is also opposed to the LED cornice lighting and removal of the existing commemorative plaque over the center residential entrance. There is no reason to allow these changes to 65 Spring. Thank you for your time and consideration this afternoon.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christina Ninoff, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Christina Nenov, and I have lived at 65 Spring Street for almost 2 decades. In 2015, the large media conglomerate Thrillist published an article called "The 10 Sexiest Neighborhoods on Earth." In this article, Soho was named number 3, and in the center of the photo, chosen by the editors of Thrillist, was 65 Spring Street. The then editors of Thrillist had a signing ceremony in their Broadway Soho offices, and the framed article was hung in the central hallway of 65 Spring Street, leading to the front entrance doorway, flanked by 2 columns, above which is a commemorative plaque of the beloved artist who lived here, and that's where it's hung. After this time, starting about 2 weeks prior to November 2016, when the new owner purchased 65 Spring Street, and the new owner is whom I believe is some sort of appointed official of other major projects in New York City. There have been many documents and supporting documents signed for and presented to governmental entities in application for various 65 Spring Street construction, including this application today. I believe that unfortunately, some of these documents may possibly include misrepresentations, such as in today's plans by this architect in LPC-22-11906 LPC-22-11753. These are pages in his application. For example, it shows complete falsehoods on the second floor, which frankly is critical to this application and related to the front facade. It states there are doors where there are no doors, walls where there are no walls, incorrect fire egresses. There are 2 apartments shown, but there is only 1. The proposed application for barrier-free access relocates the central residential doorway to be placed directly behind a subway railing, which cuts the sidewalk in half and creates a pedestrian bottleneck, actually endangering and hindering disabled people from entry into this building due to pedestrian congestion and difficulty navigating this area. I can speak personally from years of direct experience of what it is like to enter 65 Spring Street using various assistive devices at the necessary and vital central residential front entrance. And I implore the Landmark Preservation Commission to not act as the Landmark Demolition Commission, because this is wrongly thought out. Cutting and moving of the columns and the residential entrance creates increased barriers. It ruins the historical integrity of this building and demonstrates a lack of moral consideration for the needs of the community. That stairway and the central structural walls support a 142-year-old building from 1878. In historical tax photos, LPC-001 in this application, it clearly shows that the public across the street historically has a direct line of sight, a public view of the central entrance. These are massive alterations drawn to dismantle the building and conceived with misrepresentation and commercial intentions, endangering rent-stabilized, disabled, elderly, children, minorities, and artists and creatives. It will rip out the very fabric of preservation and denigrate the needed attention to historical accuracy. And there are other less invasive ways to achieve barrier-free access that are not so violently unethical. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jason Menkes, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Jason Menkes, are you able to speak? All right, maybe we'll come back to them. Our next speaker then will be Michelle Arbalou. I'll be promoting you to panelist now.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Just being aware of time, I want to just support everything that's been said before. The photos that have been included showing the changes look like this is a quiet street and these changes won't make a significant difference. In reality, Spring Street and Lafayette are one of the busiest streets in the neighborhood, exacerbated even more so by the subway entrance. So we are talking about I'm a tenant of the building, and moving our entrance doorway right behind the subway entrance is just going to create incredible bottlenecking. It's already a very busy sidewalk, and for us to have to go in and out in the tiniest part of the sidewalk in the craziest, busiest section of the sidewalk doesn't make any sense. Beyond that, I think everything I wanted to say has been previously said, so I just wanted to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michelle Arbalou. And Michelle, you can go ahead and unmute your line and state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports this proposal, but feels that the storefront should be painted black to harmonize with its neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Pete Davies, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Pete Davies, are you able to unmute your line?
I am working on it. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Hello, commissioners. Thank you for the time. My name is Pete Davies, Broadway Residents Coalition in Soho. I speak today in opposition to this application to fully restructure the entire ground floor storefront at 65 Spring Street. As outlined in the CB2 resolution recommending denial of the application, the proposed alteration is not appropriate for this historic 5-story building. The proposed centrally located massive single retail window is the driving force behind what is being heard today. And that includes the relocation of the residential doorway, restructuring the ground floor, and removal of the central staircase. That alteration to expand retail use can only be accomplished to the detriment of residential occupants. Improvements for ADA access can be achieved through a much less radical alteration of the ground floor. The proposed relocation of the residential entranceway from the center of the building to the western edge of the property will place that relocated doorway directly opposite the subway stair, with a narrower width of sidewalk and an area that is often jammed with pedestrians. Thereby, the relocation of that doorway creates a more problematic entrance for residents. Further, the current proposal does not comport with the LPC-approved 2020 master plan for storefront infill at 65 Spring. That's LPC-19-37371, which specifies storefront windows, plural. That is how the storefront is now configured and the way it's been for over 100 years. 2 display windows on either side of the residential entrance door. In contrast to that, the current proposal shows only one massive storefront window with the residential entry shoved to the side, all to make way for larger retail use. Given the breadth of the proposed work, it is questionable if the applicant's massive alterations can be accomplished with the current residents in place. Other examples shown, such as 155 Mercer Street, involved buildings that were not occupied when the similar reconfiguration was done. The upper floors of 65 Spring are now occupied by residents, and this building is their home. We urge the LPC to reject this proposal, which is not preservation, but will cause disruption to and the potential displacement of long-time and rent-regulated tenants and will endanger all the residents at 65 Spring Street. I've been asked to note that our New York State Assembly member, Deborah Glick, hoped to appear and testify in opposition to the application and in support of the residents as well, but the timing did not work out. We urge the commissioners to deny this inappropriate application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next speaker will actually be Assembly Member Deborah Glick. And Assembly Member, I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
I'm just trying to get my video working. Well, we'll not delay you any longer by not being able to get, you can hear me, but you just can't see me. I'll start my video. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking a long lunch break so that I could get back from my other appointment in order to testify. Obviously, I am here in opposition to this proposal. I stand with the residents and the community board in asking you to deny a proposal that in no way provides preservation, but if anything, provides disruption and destruction. So moving that central residential door to the other side, anybody who's walked on Spring Street on the north side at any time of the day, especially at rush hours, understands that it is a very congested area. Moving that door so that it is further impeded by the subway entrance is totally wrong and inappropriate. The design eliminates, whether it actually states that or not, but it eliminates the historic look of the building. It creates, there are LED lights to be placed on the cornice that are not only not historic, but undermine the historic character of the building. And as has been said, the massive amount of construction envisioned is likely to displace the residents. It is hard to imagine that the residents could continue living in there, and perhaps that's part of the plan to disrupt tenants so much that they leave. This is an inappropriate change for the sheer purpose of commercial benefit and not for the historic preservation and not for the preservation of the people who actually reside and have resided in that location for years. So I would ask the Landmarks Commission to reject this proposal. I'm not sure if there's something that the applicant can come back and do to make it a less obnoxious proposal, but as it stands now, I will hope that you will reject this. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And so we do not have any additional signups, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So I will note that we also received 6 additional letters from tenants and nearby residents opposed to this proposal, citing concerns about removing historic fabric and safety and tenant displacement. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the comments. And, you know, while we are very sympathetic to the tenants, tenant-landlord relations and the tenants' concerns about the use, and I hope that, you know, that the owner will continue to work with the tenants. You know, the items under our purview really are the appropriateness, the architectural appropriateness of moving the cast iron and the design of the new infill. And so your comments may want to sort of restate some of the precedent examples that you showed in the initial presentation, but should you also wish to address some of the tenants' concerns, you may do so as well for that. So please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. And I do want to address those concerns about tenancy, occupancy, and construction disruption. We included in this presentation, yeah, if you could go to the appendix drawings, we did include, I don't want to focus on this too much, it's not really part of the application, and these are going to be much more further developed, but the Department of Buildings has very strict requirements for tenant protection during construction. And the good thing is that the first floor retail spaces are vacant, the second floor apartments are vacant. So that new entrance and stair can be constructed as a first phase of this project. And then next slide, if you go to the next page, that central stair is being maintained. So there is no plan to move that current access stair for the tenants on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. If you could go, Marie, to page 8, I'll just talk about the accessibility concerns. Right before this, yes. So the current condition, I just want to reiterate that the current condition at all doors is in no way ADA accessible. There's a step up to every door. There is an 8-inch step up to the residential entrance door, and just 3 feet between the 2 columns. And what we're proposing on the next page would provide all of the required ADA clearances, the 18 inches on the pull side of the door. That door, the residential entrance door, will be recessed into the building. So even though it's located behind the subway entrance, there's still 8 foot 5 inches clear from the door to the subway entrance.
Okay, thank you. And do you want to address again the appropriateness of relocating the cast iron columns?
Sure. Yeah. Like we pointed out in one of the slides for precedent, there are other conditions for mixed-use tenement buildings. I think it's next page. Mixed-use tenement buildings that had original configurations with one large store on one side and an off-center building entrance. And I believe what happens in those buildings is very similar to what we're proposing with the stair. Slightly different. I think that there's probably a long corridor when you enter on the first floor, and then you kind of turn and transfer over to that center stair.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yes, just a quick question about whether or not you had considered putting the stair on the other side so that the residential entry was on the right side instead of the left side?
Yes, and we are very sympathetic with the concerns about how crowded that street is. We feel, and the owner feels, that there will be a lot of foot traffic in and out of the retail store. There will be, obviously traffic in and out of the residential entry door, but again, there are 8 units in the building. So we felt that would be a less operated door, a less busy portion of the building.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Thanks. The pictures up here say one thing, but I'm interested, did you find precedent for extremely large plate glass storefront windows? Because that's what you're proposing. And I don't see that in these examples.
No, not to that width. I think there is the photo on the bottom, 70 Green Street. It's a narrower building, and that does have a single display window that goes from bulkhead to underside of cornice.
I can't see which one that is. Is that the lower
bottom left? Yes. Yeah. But no, not quite that configuration. But we do believe that the historic configuration at this building, although the display windows were much narrower, it looks like from the 1940s tax photo, they went from the bulkhead to the underside of glass, underside of cornice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and what was on the next slide? Were there other examples of streetscape? I thought there were some other streetscape photos. No.
No.
Oh, and then previous, and then, so 155 Mercer is a different building type, but also has a larger center window.
Right.
Okay,
That modification was done prior to designation.
got it. Okay, other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, we've heard a lot of testimony about concerns with occupancy and use. And again, those issues are not under our purview, although we are sympathetic and again, hope that those concerns can be addressed independently by the owner, between the owner and the tenants. In terms of the proposal before us, it is to relocate the historic cast iron columns to reconfigure the ground floor. And this is something we have done before. We recently approved relocating cast iron columns on a stable building in the village, and we have also done it on buildings in Tribeca to reconfigure storefronts. So it is something we have done on occasion, and as far as we know, it has been done safely. So the question is it appropriate in this instance, in this streetscape, in this historic district? And then is the resulting design of the storefront and cornice appropriate? So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate your last comment about having, because I recalled seeing us approve moving columns in the past in somewhat more controversial situations, actually, where columns were much more significant. So I don't have an objection to the moving the columns. I do have an objection to the large sheet of glass, which is to say it is disproportionate, and I don't think we saw any precedent for it. I think because Commissioner Bland pointed that out. So that I think has to be resolved perhaps with the transom. And I also agreed with the comment that, and I think they said they were going to do this. They're going to take that sheet of glass and set it back behind the columns rather than splitting them in half with the glass. So that's my second thought.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, I appreciate all of the testimony. I think it was important to hear the perspective, and I think we should all kind of take it to heart. I do, and I also I think it's important for us to have heard Chair Carroll that, in fact, we have approved and found appropriate the relocation of cast iron columns, and certainly we've asked in previous projects for them to be retained or rebuilt, which means that that's possible for it to be done and for it to be done well. So I think it's a good model for this situation. I think that what's really special about the building is the fact that there is a central entry door, and the historic photographs show that there was a sister building that also had that same configuration, which is no longer there. So I was wondering about that, and then I realized that it's actually not. It is the fact that it's a center door, but maybe not. That's not the most significant thing. The most significant thing is that it's a deep recess, which means you read the column as a kind of an extended pier, and you actually understand it in the 3 dimensions a little bit more. And I think that that's what's, in my mind, missing from what's being proposed, is that everything is in a continuous plane, even if they do set it back a little bit. The main storefront sheet. So I think that that's what needs to shift here, is that there is more space created between, in the entryways. I don't want to say whether it should be both of them, but I'm kind of thinking probably yes, both entryways on either side should be set back. And I actually do not have a big problem with the unarticulated, no line across the large sheet of glass in the sense of the storefront. I have less of a problem with that than I do with this issue of setbacks, no setback at the door entries.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with Commissioner Gustafson in general. Like Commissioner Barron, I feel that we have allowed large sheets of glass before. And then one of the pictures he showed was something Commission approved, I'm sure. So I don't necessarily think that has a transom. I support what other commissioners think in this situation, because I think it's not a deal breaker, so to speak. But anyway, I can generally approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a very sad application in that we seem to be swept up in a very acrimonious dispute that has almost nothing to do with landmarks and the standards that we do. So, it would be very, very good from a civic perspective for the applicants to work this out, but that's not our business. There's nothing or virtually nothing about this application that is inappropriate. The relocation of cast iron columns, we do it all the time. The reconfiguration and repositioning of doors, we do it all the time. The redesign of storefronts, same story. The only thing I would say about the application is that does give me pause is the large central window. And I'll note that the applicant's examples are perhaps cherry-picked. The one that they showed of the firehouse, which was a PKSB project by the same firm, when they applied, they made a big to-do about the central window being a sheer sheet as a recollection of the open doors for the firehouse. So that's really not a relevant precedent, therefore, here. Furthermore, the Puck building, which again was another PKSB project, I don't think it was particularly relevant. It showed a freestanding element. This is not a freestanding element, although Fred noted that it might be. I do think that, the only comments I would have that are germane to our purview are, number one, I think there should be a transom across the top, or perhaps across the top and down the center. And number two, I think that the applicant should work with staff to make sure that the depth of the proposed doors match the depth of the existing doors. I think that comments about the depth of the door and the nature of the three-dimensionality of that exposed cast iron element is an important quality to this charming building and should be maintained. Lastly, I think that the applicant should work with staff again on enhancing the depth and level of detail in the proposed cornice, which I think looks a little bit desiccated.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with almost all of the comments by the commissioners. I'm very familiar with this location because I come out of the subway almost quite often to do my daily walk. And the Commissioner Goldblum is correct in the sense that, and also at the Commissioner Barron is right on. I think the articulation, and as Commissioner Bland alluded to as well, is that if you look at the image on the left versus the image on the right, is obviously that articulation and the depth. And given there were comment testimony about that the sidewalk being narrow and due to the subway station. I'm sort of intrigued by the idea, and I think whether the applicant should work with the staff about recessing the doors deeper and then articulating that bay. So I think that will really enhance the feature and then to preserve the character. It's unfortunate that this, as Commissioner Goldblum said, the tenant issue is not in our purview, but we should encourage the applicant to work. I'm glad to hear that the first 2 floors are empty, that hopefully you can do the transition smoothly. But obviously, I think the detailing could be further enhanced with the staff.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
Some days it's hard to be a commissioner. You listen to such vehement testimony, 2 elected officials, community board, all unanimous against this project. And then we're reminded properly, Sarah Carroll, by you that some of these issues don't concern us except as citizens. And that's a hard thing to separate out sometimes, but our purview is not that, although often we're being asked to use our purview to achieve other means. So I, like all the others, have opined on that, and I just wanted to get that off my chest. So I guess I'm also generally joining the group and saying there's nothing so unusual about this, except there are a few details that I think are important. One, I think to recess all of the new planes behind, or at least nearly behind the existing to be relocated columns, so that we see those columns. I mean, let's celebrate it. If we're going to move them, let's now be able to celebrate them. My comment about the width and breadth and height of the window was simply, I wanted to cover, if I was going to vote against this, so that would be the reason, perhaps. But I think I'm not going to vote against it. And I think having a wider than normal, at least normally that we know about, window there is actually quite elegant. Is it historic? Maybe not. But what does it do? It does rationalize 2 small and perhaps very difficult to release retail establishments. And this city is going through a hell of a time with retail. And I think if we can make better use of our retail, that's not a bad objective either. So I think I can accept the rearrangement on that basis. And also, I think, although I've drawn in my virtual eye, either a vertical mullion, which I didn't like, and a horizontal transom, which I didn't like. So I think I can accept the large window as it is. But I'll stop by saying, whoever it was, I think it was HDC that said, at least paint it dark gray or black as the neighbors instead of this light kind of wishy-washy gray. So there I am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with almost all the comments. And I do think that if they push the glass plane back and expose more of the columns, would be a richer architectural product. The issue for me is this square window. Square is always a powerful form. It's dominant. And whether they add a transom across piece or not, I have no real conviction which one way or the other.
Okay. All right. So I think, while some are comfortable with I think we are unanimously comfortable with the relocation of the cast iron columns and the general basic design of the storefront infill with the panel bulkheads and the new cornice. I think that we have also heard that we think that most of us believe that the planes should be set back for the entries as well as the window to fully expose the cast iron columns. And I think that we want to ask them to continue to work with the staff on the articulation of the central window, exploring the right proportions with a vertical or horizontal mullion, and to explore or restudy the colors at the storefront and the cast iron to be contextual within the streetscape, and to ensure that the cornice has enough level of detail and articulation to also be contextual. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you be comfortable with making a motion with those refinements?
We'll take a shot.
Okay, thanks.
In the matter of LPC 23-00180 65 Spring Street, Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension, the application is to replace storefront infill. I note that the building scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. I also note that the tenement building typology is not the predominant building typology in the streetscape or a typology for which the Soho Cast Iron District Extension Historic District Extension was designated. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the work will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the historic structural cast iron columns will be retained and relocated under the supervision of a professional engineer, that the new infill featuring a large display window, metal and glass doors, transoms, and panel bulkheads recalls the configuration, proportions, and painted finish of historic storefronts found throughout the historic district, that the reconfiguration of the ground floor infill from a central residential entrance flanked by two smaller storefronts, typical of tenement buildings, to a large central storefront with a side residential entrance will not detract from the building and will relate well to the streetscape, which is more typically characterized by store and loft buildings with larger storefronts, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the historic district. However, I find that the single large display window is out of scale with the building's base, and that the plane of the window obscures some of the detailing on the column sides. Therefore, I recommend that the transom be carried across the display window in alignment with the transoms over the doors, or some other feature be developed to change the size and scope of that window, and that the plane of the window be adjusted to allow the column details to be fully exposed, and also that they explore with staff the colors of the color palette of the storefront. And they work with staff on the depth of the new doors, which should match the depth of the existing doors, and on the depth and detail of the proposed cornice, and that they should fully expose the cast iron columns.
Muted.
Sorry, thank you very much. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved with the condition that you continue to work with the staff on these refinements. So please do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll now move to public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-09003, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 622, Lot 63, 73 Perry Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a French Second Empire style row house designed by William Noggle and built in 1868 and altered after 1925 with the removal of the stoop, an entrance, and installation of a medieval half-timbered style bay. The application is to alter the facade and areaway, excavate the rear yard, and construct retaining walls.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the presentation. The applicant team may begin. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Sharon Kim, and I'm the architectural designer of this project. Our proposal is for 73 Perry Street, located in the Greenwich Village. We're proposing to restore the original stoop location, decorative door surround, window and sill details, and excavate the rear yard from basement to cellar level. So from 1925 to 1937, 73 Perry has been stripped of its architectural elements that stay true to its original landmark design. The 3-story building was designed as a pair of brownstones with 71 Perry. Both were originally designed with a stoop entrance as seen in the 1925 photo. In present day, the original stoop was replaced with a basement entrance and a half timbered medieval window and 9/9 windows to match. We're proposing to restore 73 Perry's original landmark design of the building by restoring its original stoop location by architect in 1868 by architect William Noggle. By doing so, we're requesting to restore again its original stoop location, but also replicating 71 Perry's historic architectural details of the facade and stoop area. And from historic photographs that we reference from the 1940s tax photo of 71 Perry, Perry Street is iconic for its buildings with a stoop entry and ornate entrances with a carved wooden door. The architect of 73 Perry have done many projects with stoop entrances across Greenwich Village, and by restoring 73 Perry to its original landmark design, we would continue with the rich architectural history of stoops on Perry Street. And because we feel that the architectural features of this building were not protected, again, we're referencing the 1940s tax photo as much as possible as our guidance in restoring it back to the original designed intent. The rear facade will also maintain its original integrity. We propose to keep all existing openings, but replace the basement and first floor windows. And to enhance the current state of the rear yard, we would like to keep the existing openings for the basement windows, but replace them with doors. This would lead out to a rear deck and a spiral staircase from basement to the new cellar level's rear yard. And at the new rear yard, we would match the elevation of our rear neighbor here at 268 West 11th. And the proposed rear yard would have the existing planters come down all the way, as you can see here, to the cellar level with an addition of professional plantings, vertical gardens, natural permeable pavers to create a more lively and green space. And currently, these are some of the proposed plans as of now to turn this building back into a single family home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. All right, so the elephant in the room here is the peculiar and charming little Tudor bay window that you're proposing to move. Now, while there's no question that it's not original to the house, someone must have talked to you along the way about the fact that that's not our only standard, and that sometimes we look at subsequent modifications that have historic value as significant and worthy of protection. And for me anyway, I think you need to make the argument and succeed in making the argument as to why we should permit the removal of that subsequent but charming addition in order to do what you're going to do. And I don't believe I heard that.
Yeah, I think, well, originally the 1868 design by architect William Noggle was with the original stoop location, and the removal of that stoop was happening especially when a lot of stoops were being removed from brownstones throughout the city, especially in well-known historic districts. So if you walk across Perry Street, I mean, it's full of history, and to be the only building without a stoop is a bit awkward, and we would like to maintain, again, like architect William Noggle has done many stoops and brownstones across that area. So we would, that is our intent in maintaining this historic intent of the design.
I hear what you're saying, but it should be noted that you did not answer my question.
I think the other intent here with keeping the stoop for us is to also go back to the original spirit of the building and the pair of brownstones that were built. So our neighbor at 71 Perry is where we're taking these details from, and you can see here the pair. And so we would kind of repair that relationship between the two buildings as well.
And so just to kind of build on Commissioner Goldblum's question, and maybe to help you think about this a little bit more, we in this district, as well as many other districts that have original 19th century brownstones that were altered in the earliest 20th century, that 20th century layer has been found to be a significant layer in the history of the buildings and the streetscape. And so this particular district does have an early 20th century layer when single family houses were converted to multiple dwellings. And the removal of the stoop occurred. And sometimes that involved a redesign of the entire building. Sometimes it just resulted in a door at the basement level. And so when we have considered other features that may date to that sort of second layer in the building's history, such as leaded glass or stained glass windows or a different window configuration, and the question of whether removing those are appropriate, we have thought about how significant they might have been to that layer. And so often we think about, was it part of an overall redesign of the building at the time, or was it just a discrete element that didn't really relate to anything else and the rest of the building maintained its 19th century appearance? Or what is the condition of it? Was it an example of strong artful craftsmanship, or was it not that special? And so I think those are the kinds of things that Commissioner Goldblum is seeking from you, to understand the nature of this bay window, what the craftsmanship is like, what the details are like, how it relates to the other changes that were made in this period in this building, its history. So I don't know if you have enough information to expand on that.
So I'm going to jump in for a second. There was nothing that we saw in our research that led us to believe that there was an overall change in the building stylistically with this addition. There were window replacements and facade change when they changed it out of single family in the it was 1931.
Yeah.
And we didn't see anything else in the building that related back to this small addition. We also felt that, given the rest of the context on the block, it did seem kind of out of place, given that the rest of the brownstones and stoops are, for the most part, intact, versus other areas when you get further into the village where there's a lot of variation, a lot of these quirky little things. We didn't see anything like that, on this block and the surrounding one or two blocks. So that was our, general sense of it.
And just to expand on that, the interior conditions in this kind of bay window situation, it's basically a small room off of one of the bedrooms upstairs, and then it's just a closet on the interior. There's kind of nothing, no grand moment, nothing special kind of there to make it part of the fabric of that interior space.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? All right. I don't see any other questions at this time. So let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sonia to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So our first speaker will be Christina Conroy. And Christina, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the applicant for 73 Perry is proposing work on both the front and rear facades, with the work on the front to include the reconstruction of the stoop and parlor floor entrance. Normally, the VSNY supports this sort of restoration. However, rebuilding the stoop at 73 will require removing building features which have been in place for more than 85 years, a basement entrance and a projecting bay at the parlor floor level. This basement entrance and projecting bay are described in the following quotation from the designation report. Number 73 has been converted for a basement entrance, at which time a triple bay window built in the English half-timbered medieval style was added. They are also shown in the historic photos the applicant has provided. However, the applicant hasn't provided any clear close-up photos of the current condition of the basement entrance or the half-timbered bay. We are therefore asking you not to take any action on this proposal until large-scale close-up photographs of the entrance of the bay window have been provided, so members of the public can see what is being destroyed and have been given the opportunity to comment upon these removals. The VSNY recommends approval of the work on the rear facade, which will require the removal of a minimal amount of historic material and will maintain the scale and details typical of row houses of this age and style. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do not have any other signups, and I am not seeing any hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the stoop, the windows at the basement and cellar floors, the rear garden excavation and the balcony, and recommends denial of the single pane windows on the front facade. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments, largely following the line of questioning we've already started with, trying to understand more about the quality and condition of the existing bay window. So if you do have any close-up photographs or details, that would be helpful now to show us. And then I think the community board commented on single pane windows. I'm not sure if they were referring to an earlier scheme or if they're referring to the 1/1 windows, which of course would have, I think.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, it's originally we were referencing the 1925 photo. That was the 1/1 windows. But again, like the perspective of the photo is not very clear. So
yeah, the community board was kind of discussing whether the 1/1 was appropriate for the era in which the building was built, and they weren't sure. So that's where that comment, I think, came from. I think we do actually have some photos, close-ups of the basement entrance. Maybe Sharon can pull them up. But basically it's two concrete walls on either side. It's kind of wet. You go down a few steps and the door is there. The bay window is in okay shape. We did notice some damage to the roof of the bay window. And like I said, the interior of that bay window is poorly fitted out in adjacency to the actual home.
Sharon, if you click on your screen, you can advance the slides.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to find some photos, some zoom up photos on my personal computer.
Well, you won't be able to share that.
Yeah, I know that we'll have
okay.
in the existing photos here, Sharon, if we can zoom in somewhere.
Yeah, sorry, give me a second. It's in the front slide. I think.
So unfortunately, you won't be able to zoom in on these. It's important to provide zoomed in photos on your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, yeah, they're in, yeah. Shannon mentioned the roof is the only kind of deteriorating portion of the bay window. But kind of going back on understanding the again, like the historic and like background of the bay window. Yeah, once the bay, we assumed from the 1925 photo that, and with the original stoop location, that it was a very simplified version, again, with the 1/1 windows and the stoop, and then the introduction of the medieval bay window and these like 9/9 muntins were then, the implementation of that also altered the overall windows on the parlor second and third floors.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, I don't see any final questions, so we will start to move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion, and we have work to consider on the front facade, which includes the removal of the medieval designed bay window and the restoration of the stoop, and the installation of the 1/1 windows, which may be consistent with the date of the original construction and the building's original style. But should we have concerns about removing the bay window, you should also then think about the right window configuration and what would work best with the retention of the bay window. So you'll have to consider both the windows and the removal of the bay window kind of, I think, as a piece, as you, and sort of the option is, you know, I think this sort of restorative approach to its something that would have been similar to its original condition, or the early 20th century condition. And then we have the addition and lowering the grade at the rear. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you begin the discussion?
Sure. This is, to me, pure replication. And the stoop makes sense to me to replicate it, and it's relates to its next door neighbor, so it makes sense. The double hung window are keeping with the next door neighbor, so it makes sense to me. The only issue for me was just the excavation, and it was quite deep. But if it was set back from the wall as recommended by the staff, I could approve it. So I can approve this project.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I'm in full agreement with Commissioner Jefferson.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I also think, I have to say, I don't necessarily agree with the kind of the, not agree, but I don't entirely understand the early questioning, because it seems to me that in the past we have sort of readily received and found appropriate proposals that want to restore a stoop and necessarily remove a secondary set of materials. And so I do understand your point of, you know, what is the quality or the historic kind of meaning of this particular bay, just to, you know, just to add a little bit more content to that. But I think there is a strong argument and precedent to be made about returning stoop. And I think that that was the intention of the applicant and clearly stated twice. So following that, I agree with Commissioner Jefferson's points about the windows as well as the rear. I mean, I don't know if he said something about the rear, but and I'm assuming, but it's not a problem, I think, to state again, the kind of conditions that we like to recommend and to make sure are used and followed in excavation.
Okay, great, thank you. And yeah, I think just to clarify my comments, we have certainly allowed for the removal of later elements to achieve a restoration of a stoop and missing doorway and door surround. And so, but oftentimes we find that, for example, the building wasn't redesigned. And so this element wasn't part of a redesign. It wasn't turned into a Mediterranean revival style building that was now, and that was a designed change that is now being reversed. So I think that your thoughts about this are similar to the other approvals we've made where it is a discrete element, not a part of a redesign. That makes sense. Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I find it in this case, I think the return to bring it as close as possible to its partner when both buildings are still very, very similar. I mean, they haven't really been, there's been stripping of the one building, and the removal of the stoop, but so much of its original character has been preserved, as has the other building. I think that returning them to a pair is perfectly appropriate at this point, and just the applicant work with the staff that the details are in fact, compatible and reflective of the partner building.
Okay, great, thanks. Commissioner Goldblum.
Well, as the person who started the mess, I have to say that yeah, I mean, this is a tough one for me too, because it works against all of my instincts, which are obviously shared, to restore uniformity and historical accuracy and period correctness to a project that has none of the above. But I think that in looking at how we've looked at this particular district, it's not Park Slope. It's not, it's not endless fields of perfect uniformity, where, a break of that uniformity is an aberration. Here, the aberration is the rule, and the modification and the layers of history are what make the place special. And the fact that the staff back in the day found this particular quirk worthy of relatively extensive verbiage suggests to me that I shouldn't be totally cavalier in blowing it out. I don't think that this is anywhere at all like a stripped facade where they just scraped all the moldings off and put a colonial door in the basement. I think this was an intentional, whimsical, weird thing. And that said, it would certainly be aesthetically and anally satisfying to have the thing restored to the original condition. But I think that if we're, for me to be consistent with our earlier ways of looking at things like this, we would ask the applicant to help him make a case that this artifact, while perhaps charming and worthy of designation notation, is either unsustainable or poor quality or falling apart or some other thing besides I want to make my building look like my neighbor's building. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm in the minority. I wouldn't object to its being restored. It would be very satisfying, as I said, but I just don't think it's consistent. And it's really an exposing of the like a line for me anyway, not for others, obviously, between aesthetics and kind of what would make me happy as a kind of scenographic person, and preserving historic material and historic, the storytelling of a place. And I think the backyard's fun.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Chen.
With all due respect to Commissioner Goldblum, I hear his struggle. I'm in agreement with the rest of the commissioners that this is appropriate, with the exception of the excavation in the backyard and also the detailing of the working with the staff about the detailing, whether it's the railing or the whatever the rest of the commission deem appropriate in terms of the windows.
Okay. And Vice Chair Bland.
This is an appropriate struggle and a good conversation to have yet again. For me, I bring a judgment into it. I think that's what we always have to do. And in this case, trading what I view as not a terrifically elegant or beautiful and therefore significant addition for a beautiful historic addition of a stair, trading one and not having the other, leaving one and not having the other is a bad trade. And I can imagine in other kinds of cases where that might reverse itself, but the element that's been added should be retained, particularly if something as important as a new stoop is not being offered in place of it. So it's a balancing act between these two things for me, and in this case, I don't struggle. I'm with the stoop and would allow the addition, the carbuncle, to be removed.
Okay. All right. So I think that's where the majority is. And since there are multiple parts, I'll just go ahead and make this motion myself just to make sure that I capture everything, and then we'll do the vote. So in the matter of LPC 22-19003 Perry Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, a French Second Empire style row house designed by William Nagel and built in 1868 and altered after 1925 with the removal of the stoop and parlor floor entrance and the installation of a medieval half-timbered style bay. This is an application to alter the facade and areaway, excavate the rear yard, and construct retaining walls. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that only the bay and the installation of the multi-light windows relate to the medieval style. Therefore, the 1920s alterations were limited in nature versus an extensive facade alteration. That the restoration of the stoop and parlor floor entrance will help bring the building closer to its original appearance and help return continuity to the building and its sister at 71 Perry Street. That the proposed ironwork is consistent with the age and style of the building, and that the installation of brownstone facade features solid paneled parlor floor doors and 1/1 double hung windows are in keeping with the age of the building and will relate to the sister building at 71 Perry Street. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff to ensure that the details closely match the sister building that they're using as a model. And regarding the rear yard excavation, I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the adjacent rear yards are varying depths and that the block features a variety of building types and sizes. Therefore, the excavation of the rear yard will not disrupt a consistent condition within the central green space, and that the rear yard excavation will not extend below the deep rear yard of the apartment building to the south. However, I recommend that the extent of the rear yard excavation be set back from the rear property line by at least 5 feet to allow mature planting. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
No.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on the refinements, and we will move to the next item.
Okay, the next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 22-12128, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 552, Lot 7505, 133 West 4th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a neo-Grec style church house designed by Charles Haddon and built in 1879, and the application is to install a stoop gate.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. The staff will take you through the presentation. Janelle, just unmute yourself. State your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is Janelle Gunther, preservation staff. The item before you is for 133 West 4th Street. Abby, I don't have control.
You do. Have you tried the arrow keys?
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This is 133 West 4th Street, located on the north side of the street between Washington Square West and 6th Avenue in the Greenwich Village Historic District. Here is an aerial view of the subject property on the block. And the subject property is a former parish house built in 1879 that is now a residential condominiums. I will be walking you through the details of the proposal, which is to install a pair of stoop gates. Here is a photo showing the stoop and historic ironwork. This is a map showing commission-approved stoop gates within the historic district. And here are photographs of those 3 stoop gates and their stoops, as well as a rendering of the proposed gates at the subject property. Let's see. The next 2 slides will show the existing conditions of the stoop and areaway, including details of the historic areaway fence and gate, and additional photos of the historic stoop ironwork. The design of the proposed gates will use many of the same design details of the historic ironwork and will be a freestanding assembly. It will be mounted into the treads of the stoop. And lastly, here is a plan view of the plan drawing of the proposed gates and images of the proposed hardware. The applicants are present to discuss the appropriateness of the proposal and answer any questions.
Okay, the applicants, please go ahead.
My name is Mick Doyle of Atchison Doyle Partners, and with me is Andy Liu, the project architect designer on the work. Commissioners, there's no arguing that it's a beautiful, well-maintained addition to the historic district. It just happens to be located between 6th Avenue, which is very active with movie theaters, restaurants, the basketball courts, and McDougal Street, which has a very active nightlife life. And having grown up on 14th Street, I can attest to that, as it hasn't changed in, I won't give you the number of years. The block is a beautiful block. It's not a block of row houses, so to speak, but individual buildings, such as the subject property has a large apartment building to the right, which faces Washington Square Park, and to the left, church, which has been converted under your watchful eye into condominiums, and across the street of the a mixture of apartment building and smaller buildings. The building has basically 2 owners in the condominium, and they're very concerned about, in the evening, security. There's large gatherings of people who tend to sit on the steps. So we were looking for the most discreet way to just create a gentle sort of warning not to sit there. And we looked at with a lot of help from the staff, by the way, Janelle and Emma were able to point us to approved stoop gates in the district. And if we can go to that, Andy. Can we go to that slide, please? Next. Thank you. Thank you, Gina. What you can see is these were sort of one-off buildings which had the similar issue, and we looked for the most discreet way to keep it just even going across, mimicking as closely as possible the existing historic details and keeping it at the same level as you can see from the 79 Christopher Grove Street and Hudson. Our one on West 4th Street is low, discreet, and hopefully it's a self-closing gate. It's very high quality contractor is proposed to do the work. We did the Tiffany restoration work with us on St. Ignatius Loyola, and we hope that this can be approved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Two questions. On
Yeah.
this particular block, on either side, does any building have a gate on it now?
Just the church, which was from the beginning.
Okay.
But there are no similar. There's not a tradition on this block of row houses. This is sort of a one-off parish house.
Thank you. Second question. Is there a code issue opening up a gate that penetrates into the public thoroughfare? Is that a code issue? I know we have it on doors, but do we have it on gates?
It's a self-closing gate, so it can only be when someone's moving it physically. The door can't swing in the wind with the 18-inch requirement that you usually have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand and I'll turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So our first speaker will be Michelle Arbalou from Historic Districts Council, and I'll be promoting you to panelists now, Michelle. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC is generally opposed to gates on stoops if they are anti-urban. In this case, the location may warrant this unfortunate accessory, and we appreciate the sensitivity of the design. That said, our preference is for the stoop to remain open to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do not have any other signups in advance. Let me just see if we have any hands raised. We do not. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to just turn back to the applicant team and ask if there's any, if you'd like to respond to any comment that we've heard from HDC, or if you have any other final comments you'd like to make.
I think the only thing I can say is the building ownership is totally committed to keeping this in first-class condition. They've really have not spared any cost in what the proposal will do.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, so I'm starting to send you requests to unmute so that we can move to our discussion. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, oh no, let me go. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Oh, you're there, okay. Commissioner, thank you.
Oh, second.
Okay, great, thank you. That worked out. Commissioner Shamir Barron made the motion and Commissioner Jefferson seconded, so we'll note that. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is, these are, these stoop gates are things that we have, or applications that we have considered and often struggle with urbanistically. I think we do like the idea of the historic openness of a stoop, but we have approved them, most notably in this particular historic district, as well as in the Upper East Side Historic District. And in addition to these examples, I think we've also approved them on row houses on Bedford and Barrow Streets, with applicants having similar concerns about being adjacent to commercial thoroughfares. And of course, that is not our purview, but we have found in those cases the installations to be appropriate when the row house is not part of a row. In this case, this is a one-off row. It's a parish house related to the adjacent church. It's not on a block of row houses. And so we have found it appropriate when it's not part of a row, and particularly when it's nearing a more commercial thoroughfare or a thoroughfare of different building types. So with that sort of context, we'll begin our discussion. And then also we've considered whether there's damage to any historic fabric in the design of the ironwork when we have approved it. So Commissioner Chen, would you start this one?
Sure. I think in this case, this is appropriate. I think the modest nature and the detailing, given the context, I can find it appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Bland?
Similarly, I can find it appropriate, partly because it's not part of a row.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I find it difficult. I find it inappropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
I'm with Commissioner Jefferson.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baran?
Appropriate.
And Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with the other commissioners, and I was just thinking maybe they could also install a motion sensitive light. We don't, I think a lot of times people don't consider that as a possible deterrent to seating as well, and an assist to residents coming home. But anyway, I think this is fine.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree, it's appropriate.
Okay, so I think we have enough commissioners present to support the application. Commissioner Chen, would you make the motion?
Sure. Let me go to the screen. In the matter LPC 22-12128, 133 West 4th Street, Greenwich Village Historic District. The application is to install a stoop gate. Noting the building styles, scale, materials, and details among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that proposed gate will not be attached to the historic ironwork at the stoop and will only be attached at the surface treads. Therefore, the work will not result in the loss of or damage to any significant features. That the building's location between busy commercial thoroughfares has led to notable trespassing issues and safety concerns. That this building is an individual house and not part of a row. Therefore, the presence of a stoop gate will not diminish the relationship of this building to other buildings on this block or the relationship of the stoop to the sidewalk. That the design of the black finished metal gate will harmonize with the historic ironwork at the building, and its lower height will help to help it remain subordinate to the historic ironwork at the stoop. That the work will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the building or the Greenwich Village Historic District. I guess that's it.
We need a second. Sarah?
You're muted.
All right, thank you very much. I didn't realize I was muted. Vice Chair Bland, would you second the motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran,
Oh.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Nay.
With 6 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Very much.
Next item is public hearing item number 6, LPC 22-11393, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 744, Lot 10, 353 West 20th Street in the Chelsea Historic District. This is a transitional Greek revival Italianate style row house built in 1852-53. And the application is to construct rear yard and rooftop additions, extend chimneys, and excavate the cellar.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. John, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to unmute yourself and state your name for the record. Whoa. Just stay on the presentation, please. You are controlling my computer right now. So please unmute yourself and then you can state your name for the record. I'll stop. I'll stop sharing with you. And hang on, John. Hang on a second. Okay, maybe try unmuting yourself now.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Okay.
The mute button disappeared. Sorry about that.
It'll do that. All right, I'm gonna
Thank you.
give you control again. So
Yep.
go ahead and click on your screen.
Okay.
And then you can advance the slides.
So I'm
using
controlling
your
the hand now, right?
You are correct.
Okay. Thank you,
Please state your
everybody.
name for the record.
Yeah. John Gordon, Sook Design Group. Bill Sook is also here. We're here to present 353 West 20th Street. And the scope we're presenting today for the public hearing is to construct a rear yard addition and rooftop addition, extend some chimneys, and to excavate the rear yard. The project was previously approved in 2016 under another docket number, which was issued in 2016, and it expired, unfortunately, April 2021. And we are representing the project with some changes. So go to the next page. So this is the district map. This is in Chelsea Historic District, part of the extension. This is on the block here, which only a portion of the block is in the district. And you can see on the map here that the house is here. This block doesn't have a traditional yard or donut, so to speak, because there's a large public school and play yard in this area right here. This aerial view of the block looking down at the house, and then we did a block plan showing existing extensions on several of the houses in the district, and even a rooftop addition on the neighboring house at 351. So going to the historic photos, these are the 1940s photos. This is the house here at 353. We will, once we show you the existing photos, you'll see a lot of the detail has been removed, but some things remain. So we will be restoring that with the staff. We're also showing, just for context, the neighboring house at 351 and the one at 355 on the opposite side. So the subject property is here, this building. And you could see that this house is not, in a row of houses. It doesn't match the houses on either side of it. It's sort of an individual house. So this is the existing photographs of the context today. And unfortunately, 355 is doing some renovation. So there's a sidewalk bridge in front of the house, but you can see a lot of the detail has been removed. The headers have been cut off, including at the door surround. Windows here are not original. They look like they tried to replace them in the past, but we are replacing them to be more historically accurate. We're working with staff to get that worked out. I forgot to mention this is a Greek Revival, a transitional house from Greek Revival Italianate style. And it was built in 1852 to 1853. So I'll go to the next slide, and just comparing the existing photo of the front with that historic photo, so you can see them side by side. You can definitely see the differences with the door surround. That whole section there has been cut off. All the detail in the headers is gone. The windows are a little bit different. The good thing is that all the railings, the ironwork is still exists. You can't see it in these photos, unfortunately, with the trucks, but it is there, which is great. And the cornice is still there and will be restored. So this is a proposal at the front facade showing all the restoration work, working with the staff to prepare. We're showing the rooftop addition and extended chimneys, and we'll show you the visibility in later slides with the mock-up. And then we added here what was approved in the application in 2016. This is the drawing from the other different architect had prepared that. So there's some little bit of graphical differences between the drawings, but we put a screenshot of their drawing there, and that's what was approved with landmarks back then. So then we did a rendering of the front facade. showing the addition and the modifications to restore the front facade. And then we're moving to the backyard. This is the back of the house. You can see it's between two larger houses. There's really nothing, no significant feature in the back. And we just added these photos looking to the sides to show this house at 351 already has quite a large extension, and we'll see later that has a rooftop extension in some of our other slides. And then the one on 355 also is larger house. So then moving to the elevations of the rear facade, this is the existing rear facade here and the proposed rear facade, showing the extension, large glazed openings, and then the previously approved drawing of the rear facade from the prior architect is here as well, just to show we're representing pretty much similar to what they prepared back then. And then we have a rendered view of the rear facade, and also just showing the context. Again, it's between the two houses, and this house actually extends further into the yard than 353. And then existing and proposed site plans for reference. Then we did a quick axonometric. It's a cutaway, showing the neighboring houses cutaway. You can see the 351's extension is further forward towards the street on their top floor, so we're pushed back from that. We are extending the chimneys a small amount in order to make sure we comply with the regulations for chimneys, and just rooftop equipment and elevator bulkhead. Then just showing the rendered axonometrics from this is the front facade and the rear facade, showing this is a better example of the condition of the house between the other houses. So then we move to the sightline section, showing the view from across the street. This is the existing condition of the house, and then the proposed. Showing here in the section, the blue is what was approved back in 2016 as an extension for the top floor, the rear, and the excavation. We found that we can actually legally by zoning extend slightly more in the rear. So we've added about 4 feet in the rear of the house from the previous approval. So that's what the yellow is representing. Moving on to the visibility studies. We did a mock-up on the roof. This photo over here is just generally showing the mock-ups there. And then from the front, you can only see the extension of the chimneys, which are the chimneys on 353, and this is the chimney on 351. And you're basically, the visibility of that angle is from this location across the street, looking at this side. Directly in front of the house, there's some trees, but you can't see it there, so. And then there is visibility from the rear. It's very minor, but since there is this large play yard from 21st Street, if you're standing near the gate of this where the school kids could go in and out, there is a vantage point looking diagonally through. You can see in these photos, these are the fences along the sidewalk. And then we highlighted where the visibility is in these 3 shots, and I'll flip to the next page. I mean, you can't see anything with these really tiny pictures, but the next pages, they've been enlarged so you can see it better. But that's the little bit of vantage point. It's just a small pocket from here to here because you're between this large building and 351 extended further back and also quite tall. So flipping to this, you could see here, there's just a tiny bit of the mock-up is present there. And then going to the next slide, you can see a little bit of the mock-up there. And then the next one, that's a little clearer here. You can start making out a little bit of the orange netting on there, but you can see it there a tiny bit. But as you go further to the west, this building here will block your view, and further to the east, it just disappears behind this. So it's just a small window. So just showing the existing additions, the new brick we're going to be using in the back, and the metalwork materials on the rear facade. Again, plans, again, talking about, this is the existing plans, the blue and yellow, again, matching the section, showing what was approved in 2016 is the blue, and what we're applying for today is the yellow. So on the proposed plans, you should see it here. So same condition. And then we put that on the approved plans from back then too. So from the 2016 drawings, just so you get a reference point of what was approved by landmarks in 2016 versus what we're applying for today. And then just close with the renderings from the front facade and the rear facade.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And just to be clear, so the addition that was approved in 2016, I know you very clearly showed that it where it ended, how deep it was, and that the current proposal extends 3 to 4 feet beyond that, depending on the floor. Was it also the same height as what you're proposing? I think it was. In
Yeah, we kept the height exactly the same.
Okay, so the visibility of the chimneys was also previously approved in 2016?
I believe so, yep.
Okay. I mean, if it was the same height and same
Yeah.
front elevation, they should have had to.
They should have had it, yeah, in their proposal.
Okay.
It was a different architect, so I can't vouch for what they presented exactly.
Okay. And how far do you project beyond the plane of the building to in the rear facade axon to the right?
How far is 351 extending beyond our proposal?
No, but you extend beyond the building on the other side.
Beyond 355, it's about, I think it's about 2 feet.
Okay.
Maybe a little less, it's like 18 inches maybe.
Okay. So the previous approval didn't project quite as far as that current, as that.
Correct. It was a little bit shy of that.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand. And I will turn it over to Sonia to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We have a few signups. Our first speaker will be Michelle Arbalou. Michelle, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal inappropriate. At more than 12 feet, the rooftop extension is too tall. Moreover, the rear yard extension fails to maintain both the top floor's fenestration pattern and its corbelled brick cornice. Although there may be no remaining adjacent cornices to align with, we feel that what is being offered as a design solution is out of context for a residential property. We ask that the commissioners have the applicant work with staff to bring down the scale of the project and design a more residentially scaled and harmonious rear facade. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Carrie Keenan. And I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I'm excuse me. I'm David Holoka speaking on behalf of Carrie Keenan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Carrie is co-chair of Community Board 4's Chelsea Land Use Committee. Community Board 4 voted to recommend denial of the proposed rooftop and rear additions to 353 West 20th Street in the Chelsea Historic District. Although we appreciate the developer's proposed restoration of the facade, the board found the rooftop and rear additions to be excessive. The rear yard addition would be publicly visible from West 21st Street through rear yard and playground spaces. The cellar would be excavated to 5 feet from the rear lot line. The current proposal would remove all of the row house's roof and intact rear wall. The replacement structure would retain the front profile of the historic cornice and introduce a penthouse structure which would not be visible from the opposite sidewalk. The rear wall of the replacement structure would be built about 8 feet to the rear of the demolished original rear wall. The cellar level would be lowered by 6 feet and extended under the rear yard in newly excavated space to 5 feet from the rear property line. We cannot support this application. We continue to oppose approval of the rooftop addition as we did for the earlier proposal. In 2016, we noted that in taking its shape from the line of sight from the opposite sidewalk, the addition created an arbitrary building profile based on the commission's policy, not historic precedent. We still hold that sightlines from neighboring buildings deserve consideration and argue against the rooftop addition. And we oppose the total demolition of the existing rear wall and the plan to extend the house even farther into the rear yard than in the 2016 application. It was agreed between the applicant and the board that the existing transoms above the front facade parlor floor windows be retained in keeping with the transom above the entry doors, thus preserving the horizontal effect at the parlor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Pamela Wolf. And Pamela, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is David Holoka again speaking, this time on behalf of Pamela Wolf, the president of Save Chelsea. Save Chelsea opposes this project. Its so-called additions are not additions at all. Nothing would be left of the original house to add on to, except its street facade and side walls. This is blatant facadism. We agree with Community Board 4's recommendation to limit any enlargement to a 2-story rear addition projecting 8 feet into the rear yard. In the 2015 public hearing for the applicant's previous proposal, the Historic Districts Council objected to the complete destruction of the original rear wall, stating that a more sensitive approach would leave the top floor intact to show the original fenestration pattern. While their recommendation was not applied, the Commission has since made a policy of this approach. Limiting the rear addition to an 8-foot rear projection from the parlor floor and basement levels would follow the historic precedent of T-porches. It would preserve not just a token single story of rear wall historic fabric, but the top 2 stories of the rear facade, showing both the vertical and horizontal alignment of historic rear window openings that so define early row house character. Developer applicants like the owner of 353 West 20th Street have received LPC permits to remove all but the street facades of their row houses and replace the bulk of the houses with much larger new construction. These are effectively teardown permits, and then put their properties back on the market for a much higher price without performing the approved work. 2 such applicants in the Chelsea Historic District were represented by the current project's architect, who seems to specialize in facadism. The Commission issued a permit to destroy all but the facade of the oldest house in Chelsea and replace it with a much larger house based on his unsubstantiated claims that it was, quote, just falling apart. 6 years later, it still stands looking sturdy as ever, despite abandonment by its developer owner after he failed to flip it for 1.5 times his purchase price, based only on the LPC permit. In routinely approving rooftop and outsized rear additions, often in combination, LPC puts a target on the back of historic row houses. The Commission has effectively curated and authorized a replacement building design with a setback penthouse and terraced rear wall. This artificial form has nothing to do with the authentic form of early row houses, which still serves homeowners perfectly well. The profit advantage of the Commission's sanction alternative makes the destructive transformation of our historic row house districts inevitable. For the sake of preservation, this must end. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we do not have any other signups. And let's see if there's any other hands raised. There are not. So I will turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony we've heard.
I would like to comment on the commentary on the what was claimed to be a rear corbelled detail on the facade. There's actually is no corbelled detail there. It's just there's a like a wood nailer board and a a gutter attached to the back of the house, and there's no brickwork there to be restored, and there's no alignment between this house and the other houses because it was not built in a row with other houses. So those statements are not correct. So.
Okay. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm sending you all requests to unmute so we can begin our discussion. And Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this is an application to reauthorize a certificate of appropriateness that has since expired, but in addition, it is seeking to modify that work as well by enlarging the additions. So the commission in 2016 approved a rooftop and rear yard additions that wrapped around the building. And I believe that the commission found that appropriate because the building was not part of a row. But it did not project out as far as either building, just shy of the one building to the right in the rear axon. And so this proposal seeks to reauthorize the additions we approved, but also to add 3 to 4 feet in depth beyond that. That varies depending on the floor. So we'll begin our discussion. Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
Oh, I don't know. Well, without picking it all to pieces, it just seems too big. It just seems too big. It subsumes the house. I know what we approved before. I mean, I sort of remember it. And I'm remembering too many of these things. I think David Holoka's speech was well heard by me anyway. I just feel that this, particularly the axon on the right from the rear, kind of indicates what really is going on here, which is a total sublimation of a nice little 19th century brick facade, completely subsumed by this monster. I think it's just too big. And, I'm one that always says precedent's not so important. But, and what we've done here over years is maybe creating such a precedent that I'm worrying about what we've done. And the look as well on the back is alarming to me. So, yeah. So anyway.
And I do think that's, the additions where we have approved rooftop additions and rear additions that kind of wrap around is fairly infrequent. This is, it's not. So in terms of your concern about precedent, I think
that's good to hear, because you have a overview of that I can only sort of guess at.
Yeah.
Your impeccable memory. I'm liking to hear that, because that's what does it. It's the wraparound of a rear yard extension and a roof extension, with just completely obliterates the rest of the house.
Yeah.
Might as well, a different house.
Yeah, I think it doesn't happen as often. We generally do ask to keep some sense of the building's original volume. Right. Although exceptions, we've made exceptions that we did in this case here, but also, for example, on the Upper East Side, where those townhouses historically had very large additions and full height additions, and there's a very different character in the rear. We've allowed it. Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with Commissioner Bland. It's just overwhelming.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
I agree, but I guess I just make the couple of simple suggestions, which is pulling it back to what we approved the first time, and setting back that top floor would help substantially.
Yeah.
It would be less boxy, you could define, it would define the top, the original bulk, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I agree. Set back the top floor from the parapet.
Great. Commissioner Chapin.
Well, it's hard to disagree with my fellow commissioners, and I worked on this issue, but just we did approve, but what is being added to what we approved is not a great deal comparatively. And the original approval was, I think really surrounded the building to begin with. But I will go along with my fellow commissioners.
Okay, great. Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, I agree with the consensus. I think that, to be specific, in my view, the bottom 3 floors are fine as shown, although the architecture might be a bit stark. We generally don't comment too much on the design of the lower facades, as long as the spandrels are showing, which they do. But the top floor of the former building should remain in its current location. I don't understand or remember. I have a pretty good memory for a lot of these applications. I do not remember approving this one with a full back. That's a no-no in my book. The existing historic rear wall at the top floor should remain as it always does, almost always. And the rooftop addition should be set back at least 3 feet. Sounds familiar to the applicant, I'm sure, as again, we always do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
No disagreement here.
Okay. Okay. So I think we've heard that certainly there are concerns about the additional bulk that's being added, and may even be some concerns about the reauthorization of what was previously approved, given the context here and a sort of a reevaluation. So we'll ask you to continue to work with the staff to reconfigure your proposal, and we'll bring it back as soon as you're ready. And we'll take no action today and move to the next item.
Okay, we'll now move to public hearing item number 7. This is LPC 22-11906 an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1124, Lot 59, 50 West 72nd Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. This is a neo-Renaissance style apartment hotel designed by Sugarman and Berger and built in 1926 to 27. And the application is to replace storefront windows.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will take you through the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Marie Garino, Preservation Staff. The item before you is for 50 West 72nd Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. The building is located on the south side of the street between Columbus Avenue and Central Park West. And the application is to replace these storefront windows at the front facade. So here we just have some photos showing the existing condition context. This was actually taken in 2017 before the streeteries sort of obstruct the view. And here we have the close-up of the tax photo where you can see the original condition at the base of this building where the windows matched those on the upper floor. And so the windows are currently single light fixed windows that were installed approximately 20 years ago as part of a larger commission approved application to replace all of the storefront windows at the ground floor here and to reclad the base of the building. And the applicant is proposing to install paired 4/4 double hung aluminum clad wood windows with a black finish to match the windows on the upper floors of the building and to better recall the windows and doors that were originally found at this location on the building. So here we have the existing and proposed elevation and a rendering showing the proposed condition. And here are the window details. So they'll be using a profiled panning for the mullion and the brick molds to recall the details on the upper floors. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Basically, the commissioners approved new cladding and removing 4/4 double hung windows to install single pane windows uniformly across the ground floor of the building, and the applicant is now seeking to return 4/4 double hung windows to these two openings that are furthest from the avenue. Any questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Sonia to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. Our first speaker will be Sean Corsendi from Landmark West, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now, Sean. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsendi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is excited to see this expansion of a local businessman's footprint on a corridor recognized as the Upper West Side's main street. The proposal for double hung multi-light windows is a closer nod to the original condition, but without comparisons to the particulars of the residential sashes above, our committee is left to guess as to how closely the dimensions of surrounding frames and muntins will adhere to the existing windows they seek to complement. These appear to match, but one is not certain. Further, while we agree these are preferable storefronts to the existing plate glass display windows, the proposal only addresses 2, a minority of the 8 street level apertures in this structure, which, although not reflective of the original condition, do currently maintain a cohesion among themselves. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee supports the proposed work, but requests these standards be adopted for future street level replacements at this landmark. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michelle Parker, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michelle Parker, CB7 Preservation Co-Chair. CB7's vote in favor of the application was 34-0 to 3-0. We look forward to a return of the historic double hung design and congratulate Chair Carroll for her reappointment. We're in good hands. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we do not have any other signups in advance, and there are no hands raised currently. So I will turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to turn to the applicant and ask if you would like to speak. I know you haven't really commented, but also we've heard testimony from Landmarks West with some sort of more questions about the details, and maybe you could address those. Is the applicant here? Marie, is your applicant here?
Sorry, yeah, she's here in the meeting. Selena, if you could unmute yourself and respond.
Right. Hello?
Yes, please
Can you
state
hear
your
me?
name. Yes, we can hear you now. Just state your name for the record and please go ahead.
Okay, so actually Mary made a good presentation, so I don't think I need to go through again.
Okay.
So I'm Selena Lee, an architect for the proposed storefront window alterations. So because this change was approved at the commissioner's level, even to change things back to the way they were requires that we go through the commissioner again. So by replacing the fixed windows with operational windows, we can create this restaurant and the street more lively and congenial, like a semi-public space, because people can make eye contact. And it also improves the indoor air quality through the window's natural ventilation. The 4/4 window, double hung window design will also match the existing windows at the building above. So basically, we would be making a relatively simple change to return one aspect of the building back to how it originally was and to improve the customer experience. So that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marie, I think you said that the details were intended to match the profiles and details on the upper floor windows, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay. Don't see any questions, so we'll move to our discussion. I'm sending you all requests to unmute. Right, and Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Moved.
And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think I only heard one aye, but I heard no opposition. So hearing is closed, and we'll begin our discussion, which is to return a 4/4 double hung configuration to the window openings at this side of the building that will have profiles that match the upper floor windows. Commissioner Chapin, would you begin this one?
Okay. I think this is, a minor change really, and consistent with what we permitted previously. So I can approve this as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum. Oh, Commissioner Goldblum?
Sorry, it's appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chen,
Agree.
Commissioner Bland.
Yes, finally an easy one. Very.
I know. Commissioner Jefferson,
Appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Agreed.
and Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Appropriate.
Okay, great, thanks. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 22-11906 West 72nd Street, Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. A neo-Renaissance style apartment hotel designed by Sugarman and Berger and built in 1926 to 1927. Application is to replace storefront windows. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not eliminate any significant historic fabric, that historically the window configuration at the ground floor match those at the floors above. Therefore, the installation of black finish 4/4 double hung metal windows will help to bring the building closer to its historic condition, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building, the streetscape, or the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 22-12017. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1244, lot 58, 86 Riverside Drive in the Riverside Drive, West 80th to 81st Street Historic District. This is an Elizabethan Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Clarence True and built in 1897 to 98. And the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Mary, you just need to click on your screen and then you'll have control of the presentation. Mary, do you see the request to just click on your screen?
Yes.
Just click on your screen on the presentation itself. There you go. Please state your name for the record. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Mary Langen, the architect of record representing for my client, who's the owner of 86 Riverside Drive. Presenting with me today will be Susanna Chan, who's the executive vice president architect from O'Neill Langen Architects, working on this project with me. We're presenting 86 Riverside Drive, rooftop addition within the Riverside Drive, West 80th to 81st Street Historic District. Okay, thank you. property location is the southeast corner of 81st Street and Riverside Drive. It's known as 86 Riverside Drive and also 322 West 81st Street. The design proposal within this application consists of a one-story rear addition to the existing sloped to flat portion of the roof. This is behind the street-facing gabled roof structures. It's in the background of the historic street facade. The addition also encompasses a horizontal component and an existing areaway on the lot. So the aerial view here, you can see the building, Riverside Drive, 81st Street. In this diagram here, in the red, we're showing the gabled, the ridge of the gabled roofs that face both Riverside Drive and 81st Street. The shaded blue portion back here, that's the flat portion of the roof that slopes back up to those ridges. And that's where we're proposing to make a 6-story addition. The green portion here is the existing areaway. And it's also at the rear of the lot. It's mainly the addition above the existing flat roof or the 6th story itself, which will require a certificate of appropriateness from LPC. At staff level review and under a separate application, we will apply for a certificate of appropriateness for the existing roof restoration, roof tile replacement, the exterior facade scope itself, which will be a repair and preservation of all existing detailing, stone restoration, window and door replacement, ironwork, ornamental metal, and metal flashing. 86 Riverside Drive was originally designed and built in 1897 to 98 by architect Clarence True in the Elizabethan Renaissance Revival style. Several of his buildings are located within the designated Riverside Drive West 80th to 81st Street Historic District and throughout the Upper West Side. This is the historic photo we have of our building. And then here we've created a montage to show you our building, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 remaining that were all designed by Clarence True. This building was abandoned for over 10 years. It was left unmaintained, and thus the building needs extensive restoration due to improperly maintained roofs, drains, gutters, and leaders, chimneys, windows, and doors. The new owners intend to restore the building envelope to its glory and restore and renovate the interior. New owners intend to occupy all floors as a single-family home, and as such will be installing an elevator for accessibility to all interior floors from cellar to 6th floor, the top floor being the proposed enclosed addition and its associated rooftop structure. The existing flat roof and areaway conditions are shown in this drawing and the photos. So again, this is Riverside Drive, 81st Street. These are the tiled gabled roofs that rise up from the street facades. This is the existing ridge line here, and then the slope down for the rear of the building, and then the flat roof. The photos you can see here, this first one here, you're standing on the roof, looking at an old skylight and the slope back up to the ridge lines here. This one here, you're standing here, looking at this part of the roof and the slope back up to the ridge line facing 81st Street. This photo here, this is the hatchway, that's the existing access to the roof. And then this is the areaway behind it. This photo here is on the 5th floor roof. And this shows this roof here, and then also the slope up to that, the high ridge here. The proposed design has been prepared with consideration to achieve a minimally invasive addition that is visible from the public way, but complements the characteristics, material, and detailing of the existing building. Our client's program called for additional habitable space on the existing roof, which would be the 6th story of the building. The currently undeveloped areaway is now a liability to the building in that it proposes a constant place for water ponding and infiltration, collection of debris, both organic and inorganic debris, and a haven for pigeons to nest. Therefore, we propose to locate the elevator in this part of the building, this part back here, and use the remaining space for building shafts and occupiable space. The components which make up this addition and that are visible from some of the right-of-ways are, so there's a sloped standing seam metal roof here that we propose in a zinc color. We intentionally set that back 3'8" away from the ridge lines. So it starts to slope and then flattens out 3'8" away from the existing tile roof ridge line. We did this in order to provide a break versus an extension up from the ridge line. The top of this sloped roof extends 1'0 5/8" above the existing ridge line. The additional occupiable space is currently the flat portion of the roof behind the ridge lines. That distance from that ridge line to the existing flat portion of the roof is 9'5". In this part of the building, we've located a stair, so here, to the new roof. And this is there's a sloped component of it and a flat roof component of it. So we're following the line of the stair and minimizing the height of the bulkhead and just to meet code, keeping this part as the highest part. This bulkhead will be clad in an engineered limestone product called Petrarch. It closely resembles the limestone of the building. It can be panelized to minimize the coursing of the building, and the texture also resembles the coursing of the building. The enclosure of the areaway also includes an elevator bulkhead, which is located here. And then there's also the flat roof extension here, where we're proposing to locate air conditioning condenser units and some building services. In front of those mechanical units, we will be proposing a noise baffling metal fence that will have a green wall component on the street sides of it. The new roof heights here for the elevator bulkhead, it extends 4'9" above the existing ridgeline, and then the fence that houses the condensing units extends 7'8" above the existing ridgeline. A 42-inch high guardrail that provides code compliant safety for an occupant of the upper roof deck and sits 1'11 5/8" above the existing ridgeline. So the deck itself is that. The guardrail itself is located here. And we were proposing to make that from a 316 milled steel post and cable rail. We presented this to CB7 and we presented it as aluminum. After hearing their concerns about the railing, we considered a few different options and worked with staff level at it. We considered non-reflective glass, ironwork, similar to the design of the ironwork on the lower areas of the building. And we worked with LPC on our selection. Our selection of the 316 milled steel is such that it's a material that will have less reflectivity. The cable will feel light, and the steel itself, once it's allowed to weather, it will dull and patina, and we know will fade into the skyscape. The rooftop here will be accessible for elevator maintenance, HVAC maintenance, and as an observation deck for observing views of the Hudson River and the park.
And I want to note the time. We are very behind schedule. So if you could get to the visibility and elevations.
Okay.
Thank you.
So these are the elevations of the Riverside Drive facade, the existing here and the proposed. So here we're showing the standing seam metal roof here, We're showing the guardrail here, the bulkhead in the background, the green wall fence in the background, and also you can see the elevator bulkhead in the background. This slide shows the 81st Street facade. Again, stair bulkhead here, standing seam roof, the guardrail, the elevator bulkhead, and the green wall fence. We're also showing that we need to extend this chimney, which is actually on the Riverside Drive facade. We need to extend that and provide a flue cap for that. And for that, we're proposing an oxidized copper. Section G is cutting through the building from 81st Street, going back to the south party wall, looking east. The sightline diagram here demonstrates that you cannot see the addition from the street when standing on the north side of 81st Street, directly across from the building. So here's the ridge line. This is the metal roof, the flat roof in front of the stair bulkhead, the areaway addition, and then the elevator bulkhead and the green wall fence.
Okay, I think we can understand the sections. If you can just get to the visibility, that would be
Sure.
great. The renderings, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we were able to build a mock-up, and then we took the mock-up and our drawings and provided these photo montages based on the proportions. So A1 is standing diagonally across from the building. And A1 is the existing, A2 is the proposed. So here you can see the stair bulkhead roof here, and you can see the cable rail here and the metal flue extension. This view B is taken across the street, on the sidewalk across the street here. And so here you can also see that you can see just the very top of the metal roof, the standing seam metal roof. You see the cable rail here. And then in the background, you can see, you can see the zinc colored, the flue extension here. View C is across the street on 81st Street. This is the neighboring building. You can see here that you cannot see the extension. And I'd like to point out that our guardrail is very similar to the one on the neighboring building here. View D is taken from standing on the northwest of the building. It's the part of Riverside Drive that curves up to the north. And from this point of view, you can see the stair bulkhead here, which we're pointing out, the top of the metal roof, and you can see the guardrail as it bends around both streets. And you can also see the green wall. And we blew that up. This is our mock-up. So we created the stair bulkhead, the elevator bulkhead, the green wall fence, and the guardrail, and photographed it and put the orange mesh. And we did use that when we were creating our photo montage. This here shows the existing condition, and then it also shows the 6th floor addition, the floor plan of it. This is the location for the stair up to the roof, the elevator, occupiable space, and then mechanical shafts. This shows the area of the sloped roof plane that rises up from the ridge and has the skylights in it. This is a repeat, again, showing in the background here, the back of the building, the stair bulkhead, the elevator bulkhead.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have the layout of the plan.
Okay. And then these two slides just show our rear addition, the areaway addition. Okay. So that's it. And thank you for your time and consideration regarding what we believe will be a beautifully restored home.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Krasavich, to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. And I'll start with people that signed up in advance with Sean Corsandy.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Sean Corsandy for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is very concerned by this proposal. With all but 14 structures in the district by Clarence True, the Riverside Drive West 80th to 81st Street Historic District might well be named for him. Known for creating a scene, here, True used his full toolbox for a harmonious streetscape, but per usual, saved the best for last, or in this instance, most prominent corner lots, number 86. Demanding attention from passersby and buttressing the row in two directions, 86 Riverside Drive's outsized role in the ensemble was understood by True, who made it the largest of his sequence. Leaning on a rich assemblage of skylights, parapets, gables, dormers, chimneys, and stepped end walls and the like, True gave this building everything he could, but he did not give it a steel cable railing system. He purposely gave it steeply pitched tile roofs, which demand the eye take notice, yet no roof observation deck. This was all intentional by design and insists the urban explorer pay attention. In his portfolio titled Designs of 141 Dwelling Houses Built on the West Side, True best outlined his manifesto, quote, that this unattractiveness is everywhere, visible along the avenues and streets of our city, end quote. And thus he sought to rectify a miscarriage of urban realm and made it his life's mission. The resulting 86 Riverside Drive is a prime example of his response to mediocrity. The proposal to interrupt the strong-willed, attention-seeking roof pitches and ornate rooftop celebrations with visible and unnecessary utilitarian devices seen from multiple locations on the right-of-way and from the scenic landmark of Riverside Drive and Park not only undermines the original, but it invites similar treatment to the contiguous row, which is the lion's share of this district. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee deems the proposal for rooftop additions excessive and urges denial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then next, Michelle Parker.
Thank you, Michelle Parker, co-chair of CB7 Preservation. I wish I could say, I wish I could talk to you about CB7's disapproval in the same words that Sean did, but our full board voted to disapprove this application by a vote of 32-040. We found that the construction on the roof was more than minimally visible from several vantage points, including across the street on Riverside Drive and in Riverside Park. We urge you to disapprove this application, but we look forward to the other work they're doing on this beautiful building, because I know personally that it has been empty for a long, long time. But we look forward to all the other work that they will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Igor Kroll. Okay, Igor, I see you've joined. You just need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. I just sent a request for you to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing my short speech. I live next to 86 Riverside Drive for the past 30-some years. This building is the centerpiece of the 9-building ensemble built at the very end of the 19th century. These 9 houses are not merely of a piece. They were built as one piece with H6 Riverside Drive as the centerpiece. From what I discovered during restoration of my house, these houses share foundations and party walls. All floors are on the same level. When Clarence True built those houses, they were opening inside walls so that the workers could march from 316 on West 81st Street all the way to 81 Riverside Drive and back while building the houses. Most importantly to me, all the roofs are at the same level. Sure enough, over time, bulkheads grew on few roofs, but so far, no one has built floor 6 on any one of the True houses. This application proposes to put yet another floor where the roof was, top it with the new roof, and then put a bulkhead on the new roof. From where I sit, it appears to be completely out of place in these houses, not only designed as one, but built as one. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize. Could you please state your name for the record? Okay, I think you might have left, but that was Igor Kroll, who also sent us a written testimony. Thank you. Okay, and I do not see anybody else with their hand raised.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the comments, both comments about the sort of massing on the picturesque roof line, as well as the relationship to the other houses.
Yes, I mean, we did take that very much into consideration, those ridge lines, and we do understand the prominence of that, which is why we did slope our addition away from that ridge line. And we also, you know, because we wanted to put the elevator into the building, and because we wanted to, you know, take advantage of that flat roof behind the ridge lines, which we feel our addition is more in the background, and we feel we've preserved the historic character of the two, you know, street facades here, which are quite dominant. And so we really did think about, you know, trying to preserve that line and also have our addition be as a backdrop, just as there's so much, you know, skyscrape in the backdrop here. So we did consider that, and I do understand Igor Kroll's comments about that, and there was a lot of thought put into that. Regarding the you know, the size of the addition, you know, we do see that as condensed. We've given great thought to where we put the stair and the elevator bulkhead. And we do think, yes, the addition is visible, but we do think that the materials we've used have been selected to preserve, again, and become like a backdrop to the main facades of the building on the street.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any final questions?
I'm sorry, if I may add, there is precedent in the neighboring building of an addition on the upper floor.
Okay. Can you just state your name for the record as well?
My name is Susanna Chan with O'Neill Langen Architects. And if I could point out to page 4, Mary, if you wouldn't mind switching back to page 4, there is an existing expansion that currently at the neighboring house on page 4, which is A-000. In the lower right-hand corner, the previous page, I wanted to point out the red construction that actually lines up with the ridge line. The third photograph down is, in fact, a vertical extension at 320 West 81st Street.
Yeah,
so I just want that.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we have a question, Commissioner Gustafson, please go ahead.
Yeah, and that example that was just given to us, is that something we approved?
I don't know that.
We don't know that, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any other final questions? And Commissioner Gustafson, the staff can maybe try to figure out the history of that addition for you, the adjacent building.
Thank you.
And whether it predates designation. Okay. Oops. I just sent you all requests to unmute, so hopefully you'll accept those. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. This is the corner building within a row of row houses designed by Clarence True, and the proposal is to infill the rear yard, courtyard, and do a rooftop addition set back from the sloped pitched roofs at the front of the house. And there is some visibility along Riverside Drive and into the park. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you like to start this one? Oh,
She had
leave
to
us? Oh,
leave.
she left already.
She had to
Okay.
leave, yeah.
But she was here during the presentation, so I didn't realize she had left. All right, Commissioner Goldblum, would you please lead this one?
Okay, sure. So I think that the visibility of the rooftop addition is too great. I think that the applicant should work with the staff to reduce the visibility significantly, especially of the railing and the stair bulkhead. I think the applicant should explore with the staff the possible use of a hatch in lieu of a bulkhead on a single family house. I believe we've seen that in other jobs. This is the place to do it. And I believe that we've seen many times where railings are recessed to avoid visibility. This is one of the cases where that needs to happen. I do want to note that we did approve a very visible or somewhat very visible rooftop addition a few blocks to the south, I believe, on a mid-block house, a twin townhouse where they put a lot on the roof, and it is somewhat visible from the park. And there was another house very much like this on West End Avenue where they did something very similar and infilled a kind of a court, but theirs was completely non-visible from the street. And this one should seek to be as close to that goal as possible.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I think the rooftop setback is necessary with the bulkhead and also the proposed railing be set back as minimally as possible.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I'm there too. Same thing. It's just too visible. It can be pushed back, and the railing pushed back as well.
Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Agreed.
And Commissioner Chapin?
I agree.
Okay, and do you all agree that this is something they can work on with the staff to significantly reduce the visibility of the bulkhead and the railing and any other portions that can be set back, or would you like it to come back?
Staff.
Staff, okay,
Yeah,
that's what I
I'm okay
think.
with it.
Okay, great. All right, so Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to approve with those modifications?
Okay. Regarding 86 Riverside Drive in the West 80th, 81st Street Historic District, the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions. I note building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Riverside Drive West 80th, 81st Street Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding the construction of the additions will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features of the roof or light well. The size of the proposed additions will not overwhelm the building or surrounding streetscape. That the proposed rooftop addition will be set back from the primary facades behind a ridge line on the historic of the historic slip roof, thereby helping it maintain a sense of the building's original massing. that the design and materiality of the rooftop addition featuring cast stone cladding and standing seam metal roofing will be in keeping with the scale and character of the historic building. The presence of the visible stair bulkhead will be in keeping with other visible rooftop accretions. I think I'll skip that. And the proposed light well addition will not eliminate any rear yard or detract from central green space. However, the applicant will work with staff to minimize visibility of the bulkhead and pull back the railings and explore the possibility of the use of a hatch in lieu of a bulkhead, all in the effort to reduce visibility to absolute minimum.
Thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved with those modifications. Please work carefully with the staff to address the visibility issues as described in the motion. And we'll move to the next item.
All right, the next item is public hearing item number 9, LPC 22-12198, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1868, lot 59, 258 West 97th Street in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. This is a Renaissance Revival style flats building designed by C. Huntington and built in 1901-03. The application is to alter the facade to create a barrier-free access entrance and install EFIS cladding at courtyard facades.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Toby, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. Perfect. And you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. The project team may state their name for the record and begin.
So Joanne Page, I'm the president and CEO of the Fortune Society, and I would just like to give you a very brief background. Fortune is a 55-year-old organization, nonprofit, serves about 9,000 men, women, formerly incarcerated, with a whole array of services, including housing. And 25 to 30% of the people who come to us are homeless. The Upper West Side is a superb community of opportunity, desperately needs supportive housing for homeless people and desperately needs affordable housing that is deeply affordable. We have purchased this building that was an SRO and had been converted into an illegal hotel. We plan on having 84 living units split between supportive and between affordable, and one superintendent's apartment. We fell in love with the building, and I will turn it over to our architects, Curtis and Ginsberg.
Toby, unmute.
Toby, I'm going to take the presentation away from you and try to give it back to you so that you can unmute yourself. So why don't you unmute yourself now?
I'm
Perfect.
unmuted now. Thank you.
Great. I will give you back control. Go ahead and click on your screen. There you go.
Okay, great. So I'm Toby Cornejo. I work with Curtis and Ginsberg Architects, and we're the architect on this project with the Fortune Society. Mark Ginsberg will be speaking in a few minutes from Curtis and Ginsberg Architects as well. So we're coming before you today to talk about two features of a larger project, the EFIS on the courtyard facades, and then the modification to a front window for barrier-free access. But I just wanted to give you just a brief overview of where these sit within the larger project. Major goal of this project is to improve the energy efficiency of the building. And we were just awarded an incentive pilot grant from HPD to help fund the incremental costs of improving the building systems. So we'll be electrifying heating and cooling throughout the building. And so that is a big driver for the need to improve the performance of the envelope. So the building also as you heard from Joanne, as being returned to permanent housing. So we really want to do kind of the generational improvement to the building to do that the right way. So the building is in the Riverside West End Historic District. It's right on the edge. It's on 97th Street between Broadway and West End. The east side is the most visible non-primary facade of the building. It was built in 1903. In the 40s, here on the left, it sat between two larger buildings. By the 80s, the building to the east side of the building had been replaced by a one-story parking garage that was part of a larger, taller 34-story project that is along the corner to the southeast of the project. Today, this is what it looks like on the right, with the non-primary facade quite visible on the east side. This is one of the surfaces where we're going to be looking to put EIFS on, replacing this cream with a cream EIFS finish. Here's a closer view of that. At the front of the building, this is the current non-historic entrance, which will be retained as it is. There are 2 steps up, and there are more steps on the inside. And just to the left here, this window is where we're looking to make the alteration for the barrier-free access by extending this masonry opening down and inserting a metal bridge across this front areaway. We'd be replicating a lot of this ironwork to make it fit in with all the existing ironwork here at the front. So this is showing you the outline of where the EIFS would go on the side facades and around the bulkhead. Right now, we can't put it on the back because we have a non-compliant rear yard. It's too shallow. Here, this is just showing you the plan in the front with the steps to the front stoop and the steps inside the vestibule. And this is where that new entrance would sit, and it would lead to a new lower landing that is adjacent at the same height as the street, and it would allow for a vertical platform lift to provide fully accessible access up to the first floor and down to the cellar. And the Fortune Society, as part of converting the building, will be creating a lot of new program space in the cellar. So it's important to us to have an accessible route down to the cellar if the existing elevator is not currently accessible. And we looked at doing the accessible entrance at the main entrance, but that landing that goes to the main door goes over the main point of entries for the utilities that come into the building. And this is where they are underneath that landing. So at the front, we're looking at just taking out that existing window, taking out this piece of the fencing and replacing it with window grills and fencing that match the existing, and a new door here that would have grading on the front as well, which you see on a lot of building entrances around the neighborhood. And this would, all the metal work here would be painted black to match the existing metal work. And here's just a little bit more to show how this lays out, where it would be on the street. And I'll let Mark talk about the EIFS.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you, commissioners. So as Toby mentioned, we've gotten a special pilot grant from HPD and NYSERDA to retrofit and electrify the project. And as part of electrification, as many of you know, the first thing you want to do is lower the loads. And this requires adding insulation. Adding insulation on the interior is both not possible here, and even if it were possible, has issues of thermal breaks at the slab. But as you can see here, we're indicating where we would be adding an EIFS panel or EIFS system over the existing brick facade. Next slide. And here is a view showing where that would be added. On the right is the sample of the material we propose to use, which would match the color of the existing facade as much as it can. Obviously, there's variation in color. I should also note that the part of the facade that is a party wall, we legally can't do anything to. So that front section we can't touch. Next slide. And then the other side of the building is not at all visible from the street. And we would do the same thing. And as Toby mentioned, we can't do it on the rear facade, but we would also be doing it up on the bulkhead, which you can see up at the top. Next slide. And then here are some pictures of that facade. On the left are the existing details. On the right are the proposed details. We're keeping the basic relationship of the windows to the exterior plane and also expressing the sill. I should also note, we are not damaging the existing brick. We will be putting, after the brick is repaired and in good condition, an air vapor barrier will be put on it. Vertical glue will be put on it for support attaching the insulation. And this creates a secondary drainage line in the building so that if water gets behind this initial system, there is a way out and it should not damage the existing brick. Next slide. And then here is the jam condition. This is also, I should add, tied to a new roof with additional insulation, replacement of all windows with much better energy performing windows. There are a number, besides electrifying, which lowers our carbon footprint now, and by 2040, when the grid is legislated to be clean, could make the building close to net zero. As I said, we're trying to do as much as we can to improve the energy efficiency of the building in an appropriate manner. Next slide. Up at the top, we would have a new camelback coping to deal with the wider facade, but matching what's there now. And as you can see, here is our, on the right is our termination detail, which also allows for drainage from the secondary drainage plane. Next slide. And then we have the specifications for the material. Next slide. And as I mentioned, these are pictures of the bulkhead, which we also plan to overclad. Next slide. And with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Not at all about the scope or the material or the benefits and requirements for the installation? Okay, so let's move to public testimony. We have, if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand and I'll turn it over to Lisa Krasavich to take us through the testimony.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will start with the people that signed up in advance. And I'll start with Sean Corsandi.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee understands the limitations of street level access and appreciates the applicant's efforts to find alternatives. We too agree that the lift is a sensible solution with the least impact on the surrounding landmark. We ask the applicant to clarify that the color of the lift door matches the main entry doors and that the railing pattern returns perpendicular to the street alongside the new access way, neither of which were clear from the presentation. Regarding the EFIS, while this may be a cost-effective solution, it is not a historic material. Due to the massing of the large building adjacent to the east, there's a significant exposure. We'd ask that the applicant consider repainting this so the look and feel of brick remains rather than applying a foam coating. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee appreciates the overall efforts and welcomes the Fortune Society to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and next, Michelle Albany.
Hello, Michelle Arblu for the Historic Districts Council. The courtyard of this building brick wall appears to be in relatively good condition and only in need of repointing. EFS will trap massive amounts of moisture in the existing brick wall and result in its actual deterioration. We ask the commission to reject the use of this process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Michelle Parker.
Thank you, Michelle Parker, CB7 Preservation Committee. We voted unanimously on this application, a vote of 33,000. We look forward to the presence of the Fortune Society because we lived through the misery of this illegal hotel. And we are looking forward to their exciting and creative way to better energize or use better energy, or more efficient energy for this project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, John Graham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The VSNY can support the applicant's proposal to create barrier-free access at the primary facade by removing an existing ground floor window, dropping the sill, modifying the black painted iron fence, and installing a metal bridge over the areaway. Finding that the work will require the removal of a minimal amount of historic material, that the simplicity of the proposed design will not draw undue attention from the primary entrance, and that the proposed bridge is a thoughtful solution where access must be provided at buildings with sunken areaways. However, we cannot support the installation of 4 inches of rigid insulation, EVAS, on the very visible secondary eastern facade. This installation will conceal the texture of the historic masonry, hide details, and change the pattern of light and shade created by the existing window openings, making it appear that the windows have suddenly sunk into the wall. We recommend the proposal be modified to include cleaning and repointing all visible facades. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I don't see any other hands raised. I would note that we also received a letter from the Chief Sustainability Officer of New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, outlining the importance of improving the thermal performance of the structure and other aspects of the project, and urge the Commission to support the project.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony. I think it was largely supportive of the barrier-free access lift, and the changes to accommodate that, but there were some concerns about the EFS. I think some were thinking of it as a repair method, which is not actually the purpose of it. So if you can talk, I think you did try to address the issue of trapping water, and you talked about the windows being pulled forward so the relationship stays the same, but maybe you could readdress those, as well as the general appearance of the stucco as it relates to other parched side facades in the district.
Well, thank you. Let me answer the second question first about the drainage.
Yeah. We
are protecting the existing brick. We're putting an air vapor barrier over it. It will now not be subject to the freeze-thaw cycle because of the insulation outside of it. If water gets behind the main barrier, there is a secondary means of drainage, so the water should not be trapped there. The other issue I'd point out is we can't insulate on the inside because these rooms are so small. We have a number of existing tenants who are remaining. This is the only way we can make this envelope more energy efficient. And someone said put brick on it. I'm not sure exactly how we'd add, we could add the brick and add the insulation. It would take up too much space, would also create structural loads on the building that this system doesn't do it. And you cannot see this facade from close up, and the brick is already painted, and we're planning to use a finish and color that is, well, similar to what's there now. We would lose the lines of the brick underneath the paint.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I'm sending you all requests to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. All right, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll begin our discussion. And so the proposal, as we know, is two parts: the modifications to the window and wall and gate to create areaway fence to create to install a barrier-free access lift, and then the installation of EFIS on the side facades to provide insulation to make the building more energy efficient. And applicant has addressed the issue of drainage and also the relationship of the windows to the wall, and has noted that this facade is an undesigned secondary facade that is set back from the return lot line facade and further from the street, and also is not inconsistent with other stucco side facades as the lot line facade is. So I think, in the effort to think about our buildings being, our landmark buildings being energy efficient, and thinking about what the right intersection is with our preservation goals and where we prioritize appearance and materials and how we can sort of navigate that intersection, I think is an important thing for us to do. So I look forward to an interesting discussion here. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. With regard to the barrier-free access, I think it's I think it's a fine solution. I agree with the testimony on it. I think it works for me. Now, with regard to the EFIS, I think I'm not the expert on this, but if staff is comfortable with what it's going to do to the building, I think it being at this distance from the street, I think it's going to look fine, and I'm okay with it. I would rely on the staff's belief that it's going to protect rather than damage the building.
Okay, great, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin?
I agree with John's comments, and I can approve it as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I too agree with John, but I'll add a little bit of detail as someone who is regrettably quite familiar with EFIS. This is what we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing a lot of this in the future. And grappling with it now is good for us and good for everybody else, because the overall aims of this project are so good and so important on so many levels that it's important for us to grapple with it and figure it out. I think for the sidewalk entry, the only thing I would add is that when you make the cut, you're cutting through rusticated stone, decorated stone. So work with staff to make sure that the details of those cuts are not butchery, but are crafty. And in terms of the EFIS, I hear Mark's use of the slip sheet, which I think is going to be effective. I don't think the brick is going to suffer, but I do have two comments. One is, I think that the staff should do a little bit of research with Mark on the use of the glue as the weeping method. The way it works is basically you just take a comb and you comb the glue, and the little rivulets water are supposed to travel down in the grooves between the glues, the combing. And in my view, and again, I haven't done research on it, but in my view, that method is very, very dependent on craft and installation quality. There's a second method of EIFS weeping, which involves a ridged back to the insulation material that's available in some brands that I think gives you a slightly better chance of having the actual weeping function. So, just do a little research with everybody. And if that's, we do want to preserve the brick. I think that's an important objective. The other thing I would suggest is that the building does display the headers, lintels over the windows. That would be very easy to score in to the EIFS and just create that texture. It won't give Victorian Society exactly what they're looking for, but it's a start. And I would say that there are, this might not be the right job for it. There are systems that are totally evil with EIFS, but they do give you a brick texture. You can do appliques that are very thin. You can do cuts. There's all kinds of tricks that they do to make mall buildings in Peoria look like they're made out of brick when they're really made out of foam and plastic. But I don't think we need to go there for this one because it is an already painted side facade that's seen at a distance. But I think you will see the headers, so I think it's worth it to make that effort.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yes, I think this is approvable. Certainly the handicap accessible design in the front is a reasonable approach. Yeah, the EIFS is a tricky material. You think it looks like stucco, and maybe from a distance, and even this distance, it might, but you get close and it's really different from stucco. And the fact that these windows will recede, as was suggested in the testimony, they'll be sort of punched into the side of this elevation, which is a secondary and undesigned elevation. So I think under those circumstances, I can go along with the better societal needs for dealing with this. And I think the way that Mark Ginsburg has described it, the only way really to deal with it, given the fact of tenancy within the existing small rooms. But I do think that the detailing, if such a thing is really possible with EIFS, and I think Michael Goldblum has had more recent experience than I have, but I had some bad experiences early on with it. But perhaps there can be some level of detailing around the windows or something that make it less unattractive than I remember it. In any event, I can approve it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Jefferson.
I can approve this. I think the EIFS, you have to be careful about the control joints, but they offer you possibilities for making this facade interesting. So think about the control joints and how you coach where they go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I think we can do a motion to recommend approval of this application with the modification that they continue to work with the staff on the detailing, particularly thinking about the window lintels and control joints. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 22-12198, 258 West 97th Street, the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. The application is to alter the facade to create a barrier-free access entrance and install EIFS cladding at courtyard facades. I note that the building scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. I recommend approval, noting that the alterations to the primary facade will provide barrier-free access to the building in the simplest manner possible, that the removal of a ground floor window and portions of plain masonry will maintain the existing lintel level of the opening, that the removal of the areaway ironwork will not eliminate any historic fabric, that the proposed new single light metal and glass door will be harmonious with the configuration of the windows throughout the facade, and the finish will be neutral, that the proposed cladding of the masonry courtyard facades with exterior insulation is an important component of the extremely energy efficient adaptation of the building, that while the installation of the proposed cladding will project beyond the plane of the facade by several inches. The new windows will be moved outward to appear at the proper depth, maintaining the character of this flats building. That the presence of a substitute material will not call undue attention to itself from public thoroughfares due to its location at a setback, secondary facade, and its stucco-like finish. That the treatment and finish of the ephes cladding will be in keeping with the common application of parging often found as secondary facades, for which precedent exists throughout the historic district, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. I recommend that the applicant continue to work with staff in connection with the ephes cladding in terms of its details, design, and application.
Great. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's approved. Please continue to work with the staff and we'll move to the next item.
Okay, the next
Thank
item
you.
is public hearing item number 10, LPC 22-10740. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1892, lot 66, 353 Riverside Drive in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. A Beaux-Arts style row house designed by Robert D. Cohn and built in 1899 to 1901. The application is to enlarge an elevator bulkhead.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will take you through the presentation.
Elizabeth Fagan, preservation staff. 353 Riverside Drive is located between West 108th and West 109th Streets in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2 and was constructed as a pair of houses with 352 Riverside Drive to the south. Here you can see some current views of the building. And the proposal before you today is to enlarge an existing elevator bulkhead and provide elevator access to the roof for tenant use. On the left, you can see photos of the existing elevator bulkhead in black with a skylight, and the chimney behind the bulkhead is a shared chimney with the neighbor. There's also an existing stair bulkhead, which you can see behind the elevator bulkhead in the bottom center photo. Here is an existing and proposed roof plan. The footprint of the elevator bulkhead will remain largely the same in plan, and to the east or right of the bulkhead, there will be a new machine room with an access stair. The size of the extended elevator bulkhead and new machine room are the code compliant minimum, and the applicants are also available to discuss this in further detail if needed. Here again are the existing and proposed roof plans. And here you can see the existing roof elevation and current elevator bulkhead. Here is the proposed elevation showing the elevator extension and new machine room and access ladder on the left side of your screen, supported by steel posts. Here's just a series of additional elevation and section drawings. Note that flues at the adjacent chimney will also need to be extended. Here are drawings from the elevator consultant showing the required headroom dimensions of the extended bulkhead. And the proposed work is visible from both the north and south along Riverside Drive. Here you can see photos of the mock-up and a rendering from the north along Riverside Drive. Some additional photos again from the north. And from the south, you can see here a portion of the bulkhead and flue extensions are visible. In the foreground of the brick chimney, please note that the gray stucco area is part of the elevator extension at the neighboring building. Here are photos of the mock-up from the roof, and on the right image, again, you can see the existing elevator extension in stucco at the neighbor. Here are some current views from Riverside Park. and a rendering of the elevator bulkhead extension, which is proposed to be clad with a brick veneer to blend with the existing chimney behind it. The machine room is a buff colored stucco along with neutral gray chimney flue extensions. And again, just some mock-up photos of and rendering from an adjacent roof. And then finally, no visibility directly across the street from the building. And I'll end here on the rendering and mock-up slide. The applicants are also here to answer any questions or clarifications you may have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony and see if we have anyone here to speak. And I will turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to take us through the testimony.
Okay, let's start with our signups. Sean Corsandi.
Good afternoon again, Commissioner Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee examined this proposal in light of two other Upper West Side applications on the docket today. The accessibility interests at 258 West 97th Street and the very different rooftop additions proposed for 86 Riverside Drive. This proposal shares interests at both. The proposal here, though, to maximize a largely flat roof is understandable, and the elevator access is equitable. By design, the shaft is already east inboard from the stair bulkhead, which helps disguise its mass. Further, the neighboring row house already has added bulk, which can help shield the visibility. Admittedly, our committee had trouble following some of the typical details in relation to the final proposal, but we do find the rendered mock-up on P19 substantial, albeit nominally visible from the public way. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee asks that if this can be reduced in any way, it be reduced, but our committee is otherwise supportive of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Michelle Parker.
Good afternoon, Michelle Parker, Community Board 7, Preservation Committee. Our board similarly approved this application in a vote by a vote of 32-0. We ask that the applicant work, or we recommended that the applicant work with your staff and you to minimize the total volume and visual impact of the elevator overrun necessary to provide access to the roof. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant if you're here and if you would like to respond to the testimony. It was generally supportive, but both asked that if there was some way that it could be reduced, it's either its size or visibility. And if you'd like to address that, that would be great.
I think I can speak to that. This project has been in development for a long time, and we knew for compliance reasons and the age of the equipment that we would be up against this. So we identified the best machinery for our property, given the extreme space constraints. Hollister Whitney, which is the gold standard. The manufacturer and the elevator contractor, through about 3 rounds, made some concessions to placement of the interior items, the footprint, the height of the ceiling, the width of the door, and made no further concessions after that point. One thing we were able to do after the community board hearing was to engage our elevator consultant another time just to make sure that there was nothing further we could do. And what we did do, and this is an evolution from the last presentation, was to drop the what you're seeing as the stucco portion against the chimney to give it a less monolithic appearance, and also to reveal a little bit more of the skyline. If you were to look at the following page, which shows a wider view, and again, I don't know if she's going, yes, there. you know, the sight lines are on other buildings with pretty unsightly appurtenances. And if you look at the rendering, we don't find this objectionable. What you would be looking at in any case is a chimney of the same height and less depth. And without this, you're also looking at the rear of the bulkhead on the neighboring property, which has been extremely cooperative in supporting this project.
Okay, thank you. And can you just state your name for the records?
Joel Posner.
Okay,
I'm the
great.
board president.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, so let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this proposal, which has received largely support from the Landmarks West and the Community Board. And the applicant has answered some questions about the work efforts they've gone through to try to reduce the massing and the visibility. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think it's appropriate. My only issue is why the stucco? Why not just one material? Because it doesn't look very sculptural, therefore more visible. That's my only comment. And I'm not sure from a distance if I could tell the difference between the stucco and the brick, but I wasn't sure because of the scale of the perspectives. But I would tend to want to see one material.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
In terms of its massing and, you know, and its materials and its finishes, I'm fine with it as is. If we wanted to add in that, get it into one material, that's fine too. But I'm okay with this.
Okay, thanks. All right, and Commissioner Chapin?
I think it will appear as a typical rooftop accretion and will not call attention to itself, so I'm okay with it.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I'm okay with it as is.
Okay, and Commissioner Bland?
Appropriate as is.
Okay. All right, so, and I'm not sure that in the views that you would actually really perceive the two different materials, but maybe we can just ask them to explore that with the staff. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you be comfortable with making a motion to approve and then just sort of adding that they continue to explore with the staff the possibility of one material and how that changes the visibility?
In the matter of LPC-22-10740, 353 Riverside Drive, Riverside, West End Historic District Extension 2. Application is to enlarge an elevated bulkhead. I note that the building style, scale, and material and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural character of the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features of the building, that the simple massing, design, and material of the building, featuring a brick veneer, buff colored stucco, and an exterior metal stair, will harmonize with existing visible accretions at the roof of this building and the adjacent buildings, and are in keeping with the typical roof accretion found at other buildings in the historic district. That the flue extension at the adjacent chimney will be neutral in finish and will not call undue attention to themselves. That while the proposed bulkhead will be visible from public thoroughfares, will be seen within context of adjacent masonry chimneys and taller apartment buildings to the north, and will not call undue attention to itself. And that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historical character of the building or the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. And perhaps they could just evaluate whether two materials or one material would be less visible.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
Right, so that's approved, and we'll move on to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 11, LPC 22-11906, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1244, lot 81, 236 Albany Avenue in the Crown Heights North Street Historic District. This is an altered Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Irving B. Ellis and built circa 1899. The application is to legalize storefront infill and windows installed without LPC permits.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will take you through the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Marcello Pacheco, Preservation Staff. This item is 236 Albany Avenue in the Crown Heights North Extension 3 Historic District. Earlier this year, 4 warning letters were issued for work completed without permits. 2 were issued for installation of light fixtures, cameras, intercom, paving, and fence modifications. The applicant worked closely with staff to address these at staff level, and these 2 violations are in the process of being rescinded. The remaining 2 warning letters were issued for the installation of ground floor storefront infill, window replacement at the 2nd and 3rd floors, and replacing the ground floor entry door. Here you can see the as-built conditions. The applicant is proposing legalization and corrective work to address these remaining violations, which is being reviewed by the Commission today. In a later slide, I will walk through the corrective scope proposed. These photos show the conditions of the building at the time of designation around 2015 before any work was done. You will note the non-historic windows and ground floor infill present at that time. Here we see the 1940s tax photo showing the historic conditions and the 1980s tax photo to the right showing the facade alterations that occurred prior to designation. To address the window violation, the applicant has removed the multi-light sashes and replaced with new single light sashes that match the historic window configuration. The commissioners will note that in the matter of the entry door cited in the violation, only a non-historic gate was removed and the door retained. That part of the violation is being addressed at staff level. In addition to the corrective work already completed at the windows, additional corrective work proposed includes painting the black panels at the sides and above the storefront infill a brick color to match the adjacent masonry. In conclusion, the proposal before you today is to legalize the as-built conditions and corrective work at the windows and storefront. The applicant will now give a brief statement and is available to answer any questions.
Hi, I don't know if you see me.
Yes, we do. Just start with your name and please go ahead with your statement.
My name is Hani Lerner. I own 236 Albany Avenue, and for the last 6 months, I worked with Marcello to resolve the violations that were issued on the building. And we were able to resolve all of them except for the storefront, which they suggested that I paint, like he said, the top and the sides in pink to match the Roman brick. And I am open to doing that if that's what you guys agree to. And I had also replaced the windows, like he said, without the muntins on them. So that was just taken care of like 2 weeks ago.
Muted. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Commissioner Jefferson, did you have a question?
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are you painting one side red where the brick is red and one side yellow where the brick is a different color? Is that the solution?
I think that Marcello and Edith had suggested I do the same color on both sides.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Could the applicant just explain how they got into this situation, which we usually ask people when they have a violation? Thank you.
Sure. So I bought the building in 2018, and I later learned that it was landmarked 3 years before that. It wasn't something that I knew about. And I was just going based on what other people on the block were doing. So everyone seemed to be putting in windows with the muntins. So I thought that my idea to match everyone seemed like a good idea. And the storefront, there were tenants were complaining that it was really dangerous. The bricks above the black door were not even attached to anything. It was just loosely hanging out over there. And I could show you, let me see if I could try to share my screen with you.
So, so it's clear you were addressing an unsightly and potentially hazardous condition, but were you aware that you needed to come to the Landmarks Commission to get a permit?
No, I only learned about it when Katie from Landmark emailed me.
With the warning letter.
Yeah, and I asked the neighbors if they even know what this, asked them, do you know that you can't do work without landmark approval once you learn? And everyone said no. Like the building right next door to mine didn't either know. She closed up her whole storefront.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand, and I will turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. I'll start with people who signed up. So Michelle Arbalou.
Hello, thank you. Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC believes that this proposal needs further study. The 1940s tax photo should guide the applicant toward the appropriate windows for this project. Further, the storefront corners in the tax photo should serve as the template for restoring that feature to the building. HDC believes that these corrections would largely mitigate this project's shortcoming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, John Graham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society, when we saw this presentation, there were some elements that have been changed since then. So some of my testimony might not quite coordinate. At the time we saw it, there were two elements: the installation of new storefront infill and the installation of new windows on the second and third floor. The VSNY can support legalization with modifications of the storefront infill. The installation of the new storefront did not require the removal of any historic material. The storefront is framed in black painted wood, a typical material and finish for storefronts in the 1890s. And the multi-light transom is an interesting adaptation of the transoms often used at the time to allow maximum light into a retail space. But the painted plywood panel installed above the transom and the section of fence and gate left in place in front of the display window, partially enclosing the trash pails, appear unfinished. We recommend that the sign ban be restudied and that details closely resembling the ventilated cornice visible in the historic photo be designed, approved, and installed. That the useless gate in front of the display window be removed and that a black painted trash enclosure be provided. Concerning the windows, we saw them with the multi-light pictures. We are delighted to learn that the windows are now 1:1. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised from the attendees.
Okay, thank you. We do have some more, but well, let me actually turn back to the applicant first and address see if there's anything from the public testimony she'd like to address, and then we'll go to more questions. So, Ms. Lerner, would you like to address any of the comments that we've heard?
The first woman who spoke, I think her name was Michelle, she was speaking really fast and I actually didn't.
I think she and the Victorian Society both recommended a cornice treatment above the storefront that would more closely recall the historic tax photo. So I guess the question is, did you put a new, what was on that band when you started your work, and did you replace the band with a new piece of plywood? Is that, or did you just paint what was there?
Yeah, we didn't touch it. We just left it there and just painted it black to match the storefront.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you. So let's see. We have more questions. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Continuing on that line of questioning, did anybody ever peek underneath the plywood? The brick under there still?
Yeah, on the other side of it is a big lentil at the top to hold the storefront, and then it was just an I-beam. So there's nothing there other than metal.
So from the windowsill on the second floor down to the glass, it's basically metal. There's no brick.
Right, there's no brick at all.
Okay,
And
thank you.
when I had this thing put in, they said that we can't put like an awning type thing because of the fire escape that's right there. So
Right.
of the obstruction. So they suggested we keep it flat.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? And then maybe if I had just a quick question about the windows and the profiles of the windows, and it might be easier for the staff to answer that question if you know the answer to it. And,
sure.
Yeah, Marcello, is there a panning or a profile on the windows?
No, there's not a panning on the windows.
Okay, so
the photo, yeah.
So I noticed on the block, there were some other houses that I think they all look the same in terms of there's a frame and then there's the glass inside it. So there's two layers. I don't know if I could share my screen with you, but there's the frame and then there's a perimeter around it. And everyone seems to have the same exact thing that I do. I was actually there this morning to do a closer look and I noticed that all of them look the same.
okay, so those may or may not be good models. We're not sure if those are historic conditions or not. But traditionally, windows would have in a masonry building would have a brick mold or a panning to recall a brick mold around it. So we can think about that. Okay. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? All right, let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion, and the proposal is to legalize painting the enframement around the storefront infill black. They did not remove a historic cornice, and so therefore the commission can't compel them to put back another cornice, although it would be nice. But we are looking at the work that they did, which is painting that enframement and band, and then the configuration and materials and details of the storefront infill, and similarly the configuration, materials and details of the windows, which have now been revised to reflect the historic configuration, but I think perhaps there may be some work that can be done on the details. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start?
Yeah, I feel that, the applicant, it's unfortunate that isn't attached to building transfers leases that that we are in a landmark, you're in a landmark district or you're in a landmark building, which would solve a lot of problems for new owners. But anyway, but the timing might have been such that the district wasn't there. I don't know. In any event, I think that the owner has tried to make a credible effort to really deal with these problems. Obviously, they're trying responsibly to come into compliance. So that's appreciated. I think that the painting is okay from my point of view. I don't think that it's necessary that we should be requiring a cornice, nice as it would be. I think that the applicant should work with the staff on the window detailing to see if it should be, there should be a brick mold here. And then they would have to do that. But I think that in general, what's being done and has been done is appropriate so that we could, bring them into compliance and approve the proposal.
Thank
So
you.
I hope
That's great. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with Diana. The only thing I would suggest is that it's hard with this building it's got like 2 or 3 different brick colors. It might be better to try to match the limestone.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I think the main thing I would suggest is just working with staff on the window details.
Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with all the comments.
And Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree as well with the recommendations of my fellow commissioners. Although I would recommend that the applicant talk to her real estate lawyer, because there's no question that when she bought this, somebody knew. Maybe she didn't, but someone who searched title, somebody knew.
Thank you. All right. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion to approve with the condition that they continue to work with the staff on the window detailing and the appropriate color, as Commissioner Goldblum has suggested, the limestone might match the other storefront and not be a mismatch with the brick.
Yeah, but that was a good suggestion. Okay, the matter of certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Brooklyn, LPC 22-11906 236 Albany Avenue, Crown Heights North, number 3, Historic District. An altered Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Irving B. Ellis and built in 1899, circa 1899. Application is to legalize storage windows installed Parks Preservation Commission permits. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Crown Heights North 3 Historic District Extension. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the work did not cause the removal of any significant historic fabric, that the removal of non-historic ground floor infill eliminated some unsympathetic alteration that detracted from the significant architectural features of the building, that the restored storefront opening recalls the size and proportion of the historic storefront opening, that the new storefront infill is simply designed and well scaled to the masonry opening, and the finish harmonizes with the window and trim elements of the primary facade, that the proposed paint at the side and upper fascia panels will blend the surrounding facade, helping this feature to recede in prominence, and that the sash replacements match the historic windows in terms of operation, configuration, finish. However, I recommend that the applicant work with the staff to ascertain if window brick mill bones need to be installed to better recall the historic window. Also, worked with the staff on the color for the fascia to determine the best color to be unobtrusive.
Great. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Sarah, Commissioner Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Getting late, it's getting late.
My computer has just crashed, so I'm doing this by hand here. Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
By a vote of 6-0 with none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so it's approved with those final modifications. So please continue to work with the staff on those refinements. And so that's going to be the last item we are going to be able to review today. Corey will read the last two items into the record and we'll try to get them on the next possible agenda.
Right, and those are items 12 and 13. Item 12 is LPC 22-11906 233-1738 Drive in Douglaston Historic District, as well as item 13 LPC 22-11753. That's 108 Shore Road, also in the Douglaston Historic District. As noted, we'll read those into the record today and present them as soon as next Tuesday or some other upcoming hearing. And of course, we will take testimony at that time.
Great. Thank you all for the long day and your hard work and commitment and dedication to everything we do. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.